The words were fresh on the stone, gouged into the marble like a wound that would not close. I'm alive, don't trust our sons. My breath left me so fast I heard it, like a bird slamming against a window, and for a heartbeat I wasn't a widow anymore, I was a wife being called back from the edge of a cliff. If this opening grips you, stay with me and don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and tell me in the comments. If you saw this message at your loved one's grave, what would you do first? Run, call, or pray? I never meant to return to the cemetery that morning. It was supposed to be an errand day, a quiet Tuesday in a town that still yawns at the sun before it gets out of bed. I had lists, bread, the good tea from Ms. Shop, chrysanthemums for the kitchen table because Bob loved their stubborn cheer. The sky had that early winter softness, the kind of gray that light can't decide whether to fight or fold into. I put on my navy cardigan and the scarf my husband picked for me on our last anniversary, the one with tiny white anchors that made him grin and say, "You're my harbor, Nora." Yes, my name is Nora Hale, and until 6 weeks ago I was married to a man who could fix anything: leaky faucets, tired toasters, a hurt child hiding behind slammed doors. On the days he couldn't fix the world, he'd fix breakfast. Eggs runny for him, firm for me, coffee sweet for both. A kiss pressed to my hairline as the weather on the radio pretended it could predict anything. We raised two sons in a house that creaks with our history. Caleb, the careful one with a mind like a ledger, and Sunlight in sneakers who learned the art of easy charm before he could tie both laces. The morning Bob died was simple, indecently simple. A heart gives out the way a light bulb goes bright, dim, gone, and the world expects you to keep moving around the dark as if you can see. We buried him on a hill that faces the river beneath a cedar that catches the afternoon wind and turns it into a hymn. I chose the stone, I chose the dates. I chose the words I thought would hold me together: beloved husband and father, keeper of small joys. I chose everything that could be chosen, and then I tried to choose how to go on. That last part refused to obey. Grief taught me new rituals. I learned the rhythm of empty rooms, the way they breathe when no one's watching. I learned the weight of a mug in a hand that no longer has another to bump against. I learned that the bed is a country you immigrate to alone. I learned that my sons love me in their own languages. Caleb in monthly spreadsheets of my bills: Mom, I put you on auto pay, no late fees now, and with evening texts that arrive like fireworks, bright and brief: you okay? Need anything? Love. I told myself we were fine. I told myself we were blessed to have two good men to carry what their father could not. I told myself the quiet was healing. And yet, if you had stepped into our kitchen the week before the message on the stone, you would have heard an undertow in the calm. The scrape of a chair pushed back too hard, the soft click of a laptop lid lowered the moment I entered, the careful pause before a sentence begins because truth needs time to put on its disguise. Still, that Tuesday began as a good day tries to. I watered the fern that refuses to die in the window above the sink. I folded two towels that still smelled like the detergent Bob insisted on buying because it smelled like a clean promise. I moved the jar of coins from one side of the counter to the other just to keep my hands working. Then I drove the long way to Ms. past the river because the water does for me what prayer does for the faithful. It keeps going, no matter who is listening. The cemetery gate was open. It always is. I told myself it was the chrysanthemums, cemeteries like visitors who come bearing color. I parked beneath the cedar, felt its needles freckle my shoulders with shade, and followed the path we wore into the grass those first stunned weeks. I have stood there enough times to know every letter of his name the way I know the map of my own palm, so I knew immediately what didn't belong. The message was cut low on the stone, just above the ground where you have to kneel to read it, as if it were meant for those who were willing to bow. Not spray paint, not chalk, cut, not as deep as the mason's chisel had carved beloved, but deep enough that I could put the pad of my thumb there and feel the rawness. I'm alive, don't trust our sons. My mind did the thing a mind does when the world breaks its own rules. It offered me three explanations all at once. First, cruelty, the random kind: someone bored, someone drunk, someone who thought grief makes easy prey. Second, mistake, another hail, another wife, a message misplaced. Third, message, the impossible one, the one that sent electricity up my spine and left my knees traitors beneath me. I didn't faint, I sat. The ground was firm and cold as an oath, and the dirt knew more than it would tell. I traced the slant of the letters, the ragged edges where the tool had slipped or hurried. A professional hadn't done this. A lover might have, or a desperate man with shaking hands and a secret he couldn't bury. I was still crouched there when I felt the air change, the way it does in a room seconds before someone speaks. I turned my head and realized I wasn't alone. 2 rows over, a woman in a lemon yellow coat, a color you choose when you refuse to surrender, stood with a bouquet of irises. She lifted her hand as if to wave and then thought better of it, settling for a small nod that strangers exchange in places holy with loss. I nodded back, and that tiny human courtesy, that small flicker of the ordinary, kept me from dissolving. I took out my phone not to photograph the words. I couldn't bear to lock them into the cold square of a screen, but to call someone. The cursor blinked in the search bar like a heartbeat. M for Mason, P for police, C for Caleb. I surprised myself and typed PETER. Peter Lynch, the funeral director. He has that calm voice that makes you believe in chairs and doors when all you can see are chasms and walls. He picked up on the second ring. Mrs. Hale. Peter, I said, and my voice sounded like a hallway I was walking down alone. There are new words on my husband's stone. He didn't say vandalism, he didn't say kids. He said, "Are you safe?" "I'm at the grave," I said. I'm reading something I don't know how to read." "Stay there, I'm close." Close, how often does help wear that kind of face? I pinched my palm to anchor myself in the body that wanted to float away. I looked at the river, steady and different, and I thought of the last day I saw Bob alive, how he squeezed my hand before stepping off the curb, how a horn blared, how a delivery truck skidded, how life decided on a sentence we didn't get to edit. We buried him closed casket. They told me it was the kindest choice. I believed them because belief is a rope you grip when the floor is gone. By the time Peter's sedan pulled up, the lemon coat woman had gone. The air smelled like damp leaves and distant rain. He is one of those men who moves the way a librarian speaks, gently as if everything might be fragile. He crouched beside me and read the words without reading them aloud. Then he sighed, not impatiently, like a doctor who recognizes the shape of a wound before seeing the chart. "When?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "I was here on Sunday, it wasn't here then." He nodded, glanced at the cedar, the hill, the faint track of tires along the service path. "I'll call the groundskeeper. We'll check the cameras at the south gate. We'll file a report." He touched the lower edge of the letters with a gloved finger. "This isn't a tool we use, someone brought their own." "I know what it says," I whispered, and hearing myself say it out loud made the world tilt again. "But what does it mean?" Peter didn't answer that. The living rarely interpret the dead for us, and the dead, if this was them, rarely bother to speak to strangers. He stood and offered me his hand. I took it, and my palm fit his the way palms remember we're pack animals, not islands. "Let's get you some water," he said. "Then we'll decide who needs to hear about this." Who? A question like a prism, splitting one beam into many. My sons' names glowed on two of those colors, and I shoved them out of my mind as if they were too hot to hold. "Don't trust our sons." The words were acid when I let them touch my thoughts. I put them back on the stone where they belonged, for now, a problem stored in a safe until I could name it without flinching. On the way to the car, my foot caught on something soft and wrong at the base of the cedar. A bouquet, wilted and gray, ribbon slack around its throat. Not unusual for a graveyard, except the ribbon was printed with a bank's logo, clean, corporate blue, crisp against decay. I slid my foot under the stems and lifted them just enough to see a sliver of envelope trapped below. It was damp, grimy at the corners, but the flap was still sealed. My name wasn't on it. No name was. But the paper was thick, the way expensive promises are. Peter saw me hesitate. "May I?" he asked. I handed it to him. He weighed it in his palm and nodded toward his trunk. "I keep evidence bags, it's habit. You learn habits when families want answers you can't give." As he sealed the envelope into plastic, the wind shivered through the cedar and rained a fine dusting of needles onto our hair. I closed my eyes and thought of Bob's laugh, the way it always came with his shoulders, his whole upper body joining in as if joy needed room. I opened my eyes to the hill, the river, the stone that now contained not just dates but a dare. "I'm alive, don't trust our sons." The living will always try to explain the impossible with convenient words. Broken boys, revenge, prank, grief, but the impossible doesn't ask permission to exist. It just sits there waiting for you to decide whether you are the kind of person who looks away or the kind who leans in. I didn't know which I was yet. I only knew I was thirsty, and the water Peter offered tasted like metal and choices. Back home, the house greeted me the way faithful things do, with the quiet that means I kept your place. The kitchen clock insisted on its minute-by-minute theology. The scarf anchors winked in the hall mirror. I set the chrysanthemums on the table and split their stems under running water the way a florist once taught me, because bodies drink better when you make it easier for them to live. The landline rang. Yes, I still have one. Bob was old-fashioned about the wires that tether us. I let it go to the machine, listened to my own recorded voice tell me to leave a message after the tone, and then Caleb's voice poured into the room. "Mom, it's me. Quick reminder, the notary is still set for Thursday. The paperwork's straightforward, don't worry, I'll pick you up at 9. He paused, added a softness he keeps in a drawer these days. "Love you." Notary, paperwork, Thursday. My heart took those words and arranged them next to the words on the stone, and together they built a door out of questions. I stood in the kitchen holding the counter as if it might buckle, and the house seemed to lean toward me, asking, "What will you do?" I looked at the scarf. I looked at the chrysanthemums. I looked at my hands. I reached for the phone. The phone rang 3 times before Caleb answered, his voice as calm and clipped as ever, the way accountants sound when they know the value of silence. "Mom, everything okay?" he asked. That question, "everything okay?" is one of the world's politest lies. People ask it expecting the answer to be yes, because no is an answer that takes too long to live with. "Caleb," I began, steadying my voice, "I went to see your father's grave this morning." A pause, then paper rustling, keys tapping. He was multitasking. "You went alone?" "Mom, I told you I'd take care of the fresh flowers." "I found a message carved into the stone," I interrupted. "It said, 'I'm alive, don't trust our sons.'" Silence, not shock, not disbelief, just a vacuum where sound should been. When he finally spoke, his tone was cautious. That's awful, someone vandalized it, I'll handle it, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Caleb's mantra since the day Bob died. Those 4 words that pretended to be protection but always felt like dismissal. If you're just joining my story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if the person you buried called out to you from the grave? Caleb, I said, I don't think it was random. Peter's looking into it. There was also an envelope under a bouquet, he sealed it for evidence. Peter Lynch? Caleb asked, voice tightening. You called the funeral guy before calling me. Yes, I said, because I didn't know what to think. Well, you should. Mom, this kind of thing, it's upsetting, but people do crazy things around cemeteries. Don't let it get in your head. In his head, my son lived in a world of spreadsheets and solvable equations. Grief didn't belong on any chart, so he filed it away under emotional irrelevance. I just thought you should know, I said, my throat dry. Of course, he replied. I'll take care of it, I'll call the cemetery office myself. Before I could protest, he added softly, You've been through enough, Mom, let me protect you. But there was something new in his tone, a tremor under the confidence, the smallest crack in his perfect control. When I hung up, I expected relief. Instead, the air in the kitchen thickened. I could almost hear Bob's laugh echoing faintly through the hall, followed by the creak of his chair, the one Caleb swore he'd donate soon because it makes the room feel smaller. I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. My husband's old truck sat there still, paint fading to memory. Caleb had offered to sell it too, to streamline things. I realized then how much my sons had rearranged since Bob's death, his office cleaned out, his tools boxed, his bank accounts handled. All for my convenience, or so they said. Maybe this was the calm before I'd begun to question the script. The front door rattled around noon. I opened it, half expecting Caleb. Instead stood there my younger one. He smiled like he always did, but his eyes carried that reckless shine that only guilt or desperation gives a person. Hey, Mom, he said, stepping inside. You look pale, you okay? Did your brother call you? I asked. He frowned. No, why? Because I found something at the cemetery today. His smile faltered. You went there again. Yes, and there was a message on your father's grave. Blinked, his throat tightening. A message. I told him what it said. For a long moment he didn't move, then he exhaled sharply, hands in his pockets. That's messed up, he said finally. Probably some sick prank. Maybe, I said, but Peter thinks whoever did it brought their own tools. His jaw twitched. Peter Lynch, you called him. The same sentence Caleb had said, nearly word for word. I crossed my arms. Why does everyone sound so defensive about that? He rubbed the back of his neck. Mom, because this isn't something you should be dealing with. It's weird, it's creepy, let me handle it. You and your brother both said that, I replied quietly. But if the message says I shouldn't trust my sons, maybe I should start doing things myself. That silenced him. We sat in the kitchen for a while. He refused coffee but kept glancing around as though the walls might tell on him. Then his eyes landed on the chrysanthemums. Dad loved those, he said softly. Yes, I replied, I bought them today. From Ms. That detail caught me off guard. How did you know? He smiled a little too quickly. You always go there, I just guessed. He reached across the table, covering my hand. His was warm but trembling. Mom, don't let this get in your head. You know Dad's gone, we saw him. Yes, I said slowly, we did. But did we really? I remembered the funeral home, closed casket, Peter's quiet assurances, the way both my sons refused to look too long at the box before it was sealed. I remembered red eyes afterward, and how Caleb pulled him aside in the hallway, whispering something I couldn't catch. That night after left, I sat by the fireplace and stared at Bob's photo on the mantel, him in his flannel shirt, one arm slung around me, both of us laughing. I don't know what's happening, I whispered, but if you're trying to tell me something, I'm listening. The house answered in creaks, the way old houses do when they're remembering. Then my phone buzzed. It was Peter. The envelope was empty, but the paper was thick enough for something to have been removed. Something had been inside, something someone didn't want me to read. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt the same chill I did that day they lowered the casket, like I was burying the wrong man. Night has a way of stripping pretense. In daylight, grief behaves. It folds itself neatly behind errands and smiles. But when the world goes quiet, truth starts packing the hallways like a restless guest that refuses to sleep. That's what it felt like that night. I sat in the living room long after midnight, the clock whispering each second like a secret. The note from Peter replayed in my mind. The envelope was empty. empty yet sealed, like someone had stolen a confession and left behind a decoy. If you're following this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because what happened next still feels impossible to believe. Tell me in the comments, would you go back to that grave alone at night? The next morning, I called Peter. "Do you have the envelope?" I asked. "Yes," he said, sounding cautious. "It's in my office. Why?" "I'd like to see it again." He hesitated. "Nora, it's just paper. There was nothing inside." "Then it won't hurt to look at it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He sighed. "I'll be in at noon. Stop by then." I hung up and looked around the kitchen. The table was covered in documents Caleb had left for me to sign, something about estate transfers and asset consolidation. My life had become a paperwork puzzle, every signature pulling another thread from my autonomy. "Not today," I muttered. I grabbed my keys. Peter's office sat behind the funeral home, a small room lined with file cabinets and framed condolences. He greeted me with that same professional gentleness, the kind reserved for people still standing in the wreckage. He handed me the sealed bag. The envelope inside was heavier than I remembered, damp but dense, as if something had once been there. "Do you mind if I open it?" I asked. He hesitated. "Technically it's evidence, but since it concerns you, I'll allow it. Just be careful." I slipped on gloves he provided and broke the seal. The paper crackled like dry leaves. Nothing inside, no letter, no photograph, but near the flap, barely visible, was a faint imprint, raised lines, backward letters pressed into the fiber. Peter fetched a small desk lamp. Under the light, I tilted the envelope until the shadow of the indentations became legible. Not a full sentence, but fragments. "Stone River Sons lie." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Peter," I whispered, "someone wrote something on this before they took the paper out." He nodded slowly. "Looks that way." I stared at the words again. "Stone River Sons lie." 4 clues, or maybe 4 warnings. "The grave is by the river," I said softly. "Yes," Peter replied, "and the stone, well, that's obvious. As for your sons." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. That evening, I sat in Bob's office, what used to be his office, now emptied except for dust and echoes. I opened the drawer Caleb had organized weeks earlier. Inside, I found an old photograph, Bob standing by the riverbank, the cedar tree behind him, smiling like he'd just told a private joke. On the back, in his handwriting, it said, "Truth hides where we rest." A shiver ran down my spine. Was it a coincidence? Or was Bob trying to leave me breadcrumbs before he died? I looked out the window. The sky was bruising into twilight. Something in me decided I couldn't wait for morning. The cemetery was deserted when I arrived. The gates creaked open, groaning in protest at my intrusion. The air smelled of wet soil and pine. My flashlight carved narrow tunnels through the dark. When I reached Bob's grave, I knelt beside it, the same spot I'd been at before. The carved message still gleamed faintly in the moonlight. I ran my fingers along the letters again. Each stroke felt deliberate, carved with purpose. Then I saw it, a faint glimmer near the base of the headstone where soil met stone. I brushed away leaves and dirt until I felt something rough, metallic. It was a small engraved symbol, a triangle intersected by a line, almost invisible unless you were searching for it. I had never seen it before. It wasn't part of the mason's work. A memory flickered, Bob at his desk, doodling that same shape in the corner of his journals. He used to tell me it meant balance, but his eyes always darted away after saying it. I reached for my phone to take a photo. Just then, movement caught my eye, something shifting beyond the cedar. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. No answer, only the whisper of branches. Then, as I turned my light toward the tree line, I saw a silhouette, a tall figure watching me from between the trunks, still, silent. "Who's there?" "Nothing." My fingers shook so hard the flashlight beam danced wildly. When I blinked, the figure was gone. But as I turned back to the grave, something else was waiting for me, a folded piece of paper pinned beneath a rock. It hadn't been there when I arrived. I pulled it free, heart pounding, and unfolded it. In bold, jagged handwriting were 3 words. "He warned you." I ran. Not walked, not hurried. Ran like I used to when Bob chased me through summer fields, breathless with laughter. Only this time there was no laughter, just wind slicing through fear. When I finally reached the car, I locked the doors and sat trembling until the sound of my own heartbeat became unbearable. I started the engine and sped home. As I pulled into the driveway, the porch light flicked on. Caleb's car was parked outside. He was sitting on the steps, waiting. Caleb stood under the porch light, its yellow glow turning his suit into something ghostly. He looked like the kind of man who'd been rehearsing patience all his life. "Mom," he said, his voice even but tight, "why were you out this late?" The question was casual only on the surface. Beneath it was something else, worry, maybe control, maybe both. "I needed to think," I replied, brushing dirt off my coat. "At midnight?" he asked, glancing at the dirt smudges on my knees. "At the cemetery." I froze. "How did you know I was there?" He blinked, realizing his mistake a second too late. "You said you'd been upset earlier, it was a guess." It was. If this story has your heart racing like mine did that night, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode, and tell me in the comments, would you confront your own child if you thought they were lying to you? "I just went to bring more flowers," I lied. "I wanted to be alone." Caleb nodded slowly, studying me like a man reading a contract for hidden clauses. "You shouldn't be alone at night, Mom, you know that." He stepped closer and the porch light caught the side of his face. Same sharp jawline as Bob, same crease between his brows when he disapproved of something. "I found something," I said carefully, "another note." He stilled. "At the grave." "Yes, it said he warned you." His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did a flicker, the smallest fracture. "Someone's trying to mess with you," he said, "probably targeting the family, maybe even for money." I crossed my arms. "So you think this is extortion?" He shrugged. "People exploit widows all the time, especially when they think there's an inheritance involved." That word, inheritance, hung between us like a crack in the ceiling no one wants to admit is spreading. After he left, the house felt smaller, as if his absence sucked all the oxygen out of the walls. I made tea and sat in Bob's old chair by the window, the one Caleb kept suggesting we get rid of. From there, I could see the driveway, his car's taillights vanishing into the distance. For a moment, I thought about running after him, demanding the truth, but something inside me whispered, "Wait." There's a rhythm to lies. They unravel faster when you give them silence to echo in. The next morning showed up unannounced again, same tired smile, same too casual posture. "Mom," he said, "Caleb told me you were up late again." "Of course he did." "He's worried about you," continued, "said you're seeing things that aren't there." "Like what?" He hesitated. "Like messages from Dad." I set my teacup down slowly. "And what do you think? You think I'm imagining it?" He smiled weakly. "I think grief does strange things. Maybe your mind's trying to find meaning. Or maybe your father's trying to tell me something," I said, voice low. Exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck again, his tell, the same nervous tick from when he was a boy. "You always believe in signs," he said. "Dad loved that about you." "And you?" I asked. "What do you believe in?" He looked away. "Money," he said with a dry laugh that didn't reach his eyes, "because it doesn't lie." When he left, I went to the filing cabinet in the hall, the one Caleb had. Most of Bob's papers were gone, replaced with neatly labeled folders: trust, title, transfers. All neat, all sterile, all unlike Bob. But behind the files, wedged against the metal wall, was a loose sheet of paper, crumpled, handwritten, and unmistakably his. "If something happens to me, Nora, look under the cedar." I sat there frozen, tracing the curve of his handwriting, the way he looped his R's like a signature of care. "Under the cedar." The same cedar by his grave. That evening, I called Peter again. "Peter," I said, my voice tight, "do you remember the cedar tree by Bob's grave?" "Of course," he said. "Why?" "I need to dig there." Silence. "Then, Nora, you can't just." "I'm not asking for permission," I said. "I'm asking for help." He sighed. "All right, after dark, bring gloves." By the time we arrived, the cemetery was wrapped in mist. Peter brought a small lantern and a shovel. We worked in silence, the sound of metal biting earth the only thing keeping the night from swallowing us whole. After a few minutes, the shovel hit something hard, not stone, metal. Peter crouched down, brushing dirt away until a small rusted box emerged. It was about the size of a shoebox, padlocked and engraved with that same strange triangle end-line symbol. "Nora," Peter began. I was already reaching for it. "Help me lift it." We carried it to his car, washed it under the trunk light. The engraving was clearer now, deliberate, hand-carved, the same as the mark on Bob's grave. "There's a locksmith near the river," Peter said quietly. "I can call him tomorrow." "No," I said, gripping the box. "This stays with me." As I turned to leave, the lantern flickered. And in that moment, a figure stood again at the edge of the trees, closer this time. Before I could react, the light died. When it came back, the figure was gone. But etched into the dirt near where we stood were fresh footprints, too deep to be mine or Peter. Back home, I locked every door. The box sat on the table like a living thing, humming with silence. When I pressed my ear close, I could swear I heard a faint metallic shift inside, like something breathing. I whispered, "Bob, what did you do?" The house didn't answer, but the wind outside did, a long, low moan that sounded almost like a warning. I didn't sleep that night. The box sat on the table in front of me, its rusted metal edges catching the moonlight through the window blinds. Every few minutes, it made that faint, almost imperceptible click sound, as if something inside was shifting on its own. I wrapped it in one of Bob's old shirts, a cotton one that still smelled faintly like sawdust and aftershave, and placed it in the corner of the kitchen. But it didn't help. The house felt awake, watching. I made coffee at 4 a.m. and sat at the counter, staring at it. By 7, the sky began to pale. Birds chirped outside as if the world hadn't turned upside down overnight. I was still sitting there when I heard a knock at the door. If you're still with me through this haunting morning, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And tell me in the comments, would you open the box or destroy it before you saw what's inside? It was Peter. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. Couldn't sleep, he admitted. You. Same, I gestured to the box. It's still locked. He stepped closer, running a finger along the corroded metal. You sure you want to do this? Bob left it for me, I said quietly. Whatever's inside, it was meant to be found. He nodded, then we'll open it. We took it out to the porch where the light was stronger. Peter pulled a small toolkit from his car, locksmith-grade picks, fine-tuned and delicate. He worked slowly, carefully. Each click echoed like a heartbeat. After several tense minutes, there was a final snap. The padlock broke. I held my breath. Peter lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in plastic, were papers, dozens of them, along with a small black USB drive. On top, a letter in Bob's handwriting addressed to me. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Nora, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. You must not trust Caleb, or they are not who you think they are. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. Peter looked at me, alarmed. I kept reading. I discovered something connected to the company, to their investments. They were laundering funds through fake properties, using my name and your account as cover. I confronted them, and the next day I was told to take a vacation. If you've buried me, Nora, it means they made sure I never came back. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I left evidence on this USB drive. Hide it, don't go to the police yet. Find Peter, he can help you. If you see the triangle symbol again, it means they're watching. And if you get this message. The final line trailed off unfinished. The ink faded into a smudge. I stared at Peter, my throat dry. He knew, I whispered. He knew before he died. Peter sat back slowly, his expression unreadable. Nora, are you sure this is Bob's handwriting? I looked at him sharply. You think I wouldn't recognize it? He held up his hands. I'm just saying, if this is real, it means your sons were involved in something serious. And if it's not, then someone wants you to believe they were. The distinction didn't comfort me. We plugged the USB drive into Peter's laptop. It contained only 3 files. Accounts transfer. His portfolio. Video 0014. Peter opened the PDF first, bank records, spreadsheets, signatures. One account had my name on it with a balance I didn't recognize. The transactions looked foreign, buried in shell companies. This is criminal-level stuff, Peter said quietly. The Excel sheet was worse, investments tied to Caleb's firm, moving funds between companies I'd never heard of. Then Peter opened the video. The footage was grainy, a security camera view. At first, just an office, fluorescent lights, a desk, 2 men sitting. Then I saw them. Caleb and my boys, my bobbies. They were arguing. Slammed his hand on the desk. You said Dad wouldn't find out. Caleb's voice was low, calm. He wasn't supposed to, he checked the accounts too early. So now what? Caleb looked at him coldly. Now we fix it permanently. The sound cut off for a few seconds, then returned faint, muffled. The camera tilted slightly like it had been disturbed. And then I heard the words that froze my blood. The cremation covers everything, Caleb said. Mom asked. She'll believe whatever she's told, she always has. Peter paused the video. The world went silent except for the ringing in my ears. I couldn't finish the sentence. Peter shut the laptop. We don't know for certain, it could be edited or. It's them, I snapped, their voices, their faces. I stood, my body trembling with a rage so sharp it felt clean. My sons killed their father. Peter reached for me, but I backed away. No, Nora, listen, if you confront them now, you'll lose any chance of justice. You need to be careful, they could. They could what? I whispered. Do to me what they did to him. Peter didn't answer. That night, I sat in my bedroom, clutching Bob's letter. The house was silent, except for the clocks ticking, each sound reminding me that I had raised two men capable of murder. But one thought kept looping in my mind. If Bob knew, why didn't he leave sooner? Maybe he had tried. Maybe the grave message wasn't a warning from beyond, but one he wrote before they made it look like he was gone. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk, eh? I stared at it, my heart pounding. Another followed seconds later. Don't trust Caleb, he's watching you. I didn't answer his message right away. My first instinct was to delete it, to pretend none of this was happening. But the truth had already taken root and pretending was no longer possible. I stared at those words, don't trust Caleb, he's watching you, until the screen dimmed. What did that mean, watching me how, through what? I stood, walked to the window, and gently parted the curtains. Caleb's car was parked across the street, empty, but my chest tightened anyway. Before we dive deeper into this unraveling nightmare, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment if you've ever discovered something about family that changed everything. Because what happened next was the moment I realized I might be the last piece of a deadly game. I waited 2 hours before replying. May, where can we meet? He responded almost instantly. Somewhere public, by the library, noon. I typed okay, then deleted it, then typed again, okay. I didn't tell Peter, I didn't tell anyone. I just grabbed my coat, slipped the USB into my purse, and drove. There was quiet, too quiet for noon. A few people worked on laptops, a couple whispered by the window. Sat in the corner, his eyes darting to the door every few seconds. He looked thinner, paler, guilt carved into his face. When he saw me, he half smiled. Mom. I said softly, sitting opposite him, what's going on? He glanced around, leaned forward. Caleb can't know I'm here. Then start talking. He rubbed his palms together, trembling. Dad found out about the accounts. He confronted Caleb. I didn't even know the full story until that night. My heart pounded the night he... Yes, he swallowed hard. I came home late, they were arguing. Caleb was shouting something about ruining everything. Dad said he'd go to the police, then I heard a crash. His eyes filled with tears. When I went in, Dad was on the floor. Caleb said it was a heart attack. He told me to help get him to the hospital, but when I called for an ambulance, Caleb stopped me. He said it was too late. I stared at him, every word feeling like a blade. And you believed him. He looked away. I wanted to, but then he called a friend, someone from the company. Two men came and took Dad's body. They told me to keep quiet, that it was already handled. The next day, the funeral was arranged. Caleb said he'd taken care of everything. The room tilted, my breath caught in my throat. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. Because he said he'd destroy me too. He has everything, recordings, fake signatures, even documents showing I approved the transfers. Mom, if the police see those, I'll go to prison. I felt sick. Those documents are on the USB, I saw them. Bob must saved proof to protect you. He blinked. What? I nodded, my voice trembling. Your father knew. He wrote a letter saying not to trust either of you, but maybe he meant not to trust Caleb. His face crumpled, then Caleb killed him to cover it up. For a long time, we sat there, the hum of the coffee machine the only sound between us. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet, steady. We go to the police. Shook his head violently. You don't understand. Caleb is the police, or close enough. He's been paying off a detective in the fraud division. If we go now, he'll know before we even leave the station. Then what do you suggest? He exhaled shakily. We need proof that Dad's death wasn't natural. If he was killed, we'll find something in the medical records or the cremation paperwork. Maybe the ashes weren't even his. The thought made my stomach twist. You think they staged it? He looked at me with haunted eyes. I think Dad might not have been cremated at all. This suddenly felt colder. I looked down, realizing my hands were shaking. If what you're saying is true, then he's still dead or not, cut in. Caleb's hiding something, that symbol on Dad's grave, I've seen it before. I froze. Where? Took out his phone, scrolled, and showed me a photo of a folder from Caleb's desk, embossed with the same triangle intersected by a line. He calls it the Balance Group. It's supposed to be a private investment syndicate, but I think it's more than that. Secret meetings, encrypted accounts, no public records. Bob mentioned that symbol in his letter, I whispered. He said if I saw it again, it meant they were watching. Looked up, fear tightening his jaw. Then they're already watching us. I leaned closer. What do you want from me? He took a shaky breath. Help me prove what Caleb did. I can't do it alone. He'll destroy me before I even get close. Something in his voice, the rawness, the regret, cut through my anger. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw my son again. The boy who used to cry when he broke something, who still carried his guilt in silence. All right, I said finally, we'll do it together. He nodded, relief flooding his face. Thank you, Mom. As I reached across the table to squeeze his hand, I caught movement outside the window, a man in a dark coat standing by the corner, pretending to read a newspaper. But when he looked up, his eyes locked directly onto mine. And in his lapel pin was the same triangle symbol. I whispered, don't look now, but we're being watched. He tensed, his hand tightening around mine. What do we do? Leave separately, I said quickly. I'll go first, wait 5 minutes, then take the back exit. He nodded, his voice barely audible. Be careful, Mom. I smiled faintly. I always am. I stood, walked calmly out the door, my pulse pounding like a drum. When I glanced back, the man was gone, the spot empty, the newspaper fluttering on the ground like a dropped warning. Back home, I found an envelope on my doorstep. No name, no address. Inside, a single printed message. Stop digging, Nora, you're next. The envelope lay on the kitchen counter like a loaded gun. White paper, sharp edges, no return address, yet somehow it hummed with threat. I read the words again. Stop digging, Nora, you're next. No signature, no clue, no mercy. I wanted to call Peter, but something inside me whispered that I shouldn't. If Caleb had eyes on me, and he clearly did, then any call could be traced, any word could trigger his next move. So instead, I made tea. It sounds strange, doesn't it, making tea when the world is collapsing? But there's something about ritual, the clinking of porcelain, the hiss of boiling water, that gives the illusion of control when everything else feels stolen. I stood at the sink, steam rising, and told myself I was still in charge. That illusion lasted exactly 3 minutes. If you're still with me, take a deep breath, and if your heart's pounding even half as fast as mine was, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story. Tell me in the comments, if you received a message like that, would you run or dig deeper? When I turned away from the kettle, I saw it, a shadow moving just beyond the curtain in the living room. Too deliberate to be wind. Too slow to be coincidence. I grabbed Bob's old flashlight from the counter and stepped forward. The beam cut through the dark like a blade. Nothing, just an open window I was sure I'd closed. The air outside was thick with drizzle and the faint smell of soil. Someone had been there, I could feel it, the way the air still held its shape as if recently disturbed. Then I noticed the marks on the sill, muddy fingerprints, 2 sets. One small, one larger. A tremor went through me. Whoever had left that message hadn't just mailed it, they delivered it by hand. I called from a burner phone Peter had given me weeks ago, back when all this still felt like paranoia. He answered on the second ring. Mom. They know, I said, someone was here. Where's the note? Kitchen counter, no prints, I checked with powder. You had powder. I watch television, I said dryly, old habits. He sighed, all right, don't panic. Caleb's at a conference tonight, he posted about it, you're safe for now. How do you know that? Because I'm watching him too. There was something chilling about how calm he sounded. I wasn't sure if it comforted or terrified me. That night I couldn't sleep. The box sat beside my bed, the USB now hidden beneath the floorboard. Every creak of the house sounded amplified, every gust of wind a whisper. At 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed again, another blocked number. This time it wasn't a text, it was a video message. The thumbnail froze my blood, it was the cemetery. I pressed play. Grainy footage, the camera panned across Bob's grave, the flowers I'd left yesterday now scattered, crushed. Then the lens focused on the headstone engraving, zooming in so close I could see the grain of the stone. But something was different. Beneath beloved husband and father, someone had carved a new line, shallow but unmistakable. He's still breathing. I dropped the phone. It clattered on the hardwood floor as my breath caught in my throat. No sound, no voice, just that image, proof that someone had been there again. I replayed the video. The timestamp read 2:02 a.m. 15 minutes before I received it. Whoever sent it had been at the grave only minutes earlier. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. Call me, I whispered into the phone, please. But as I lowered it, I saw something else, a message notification that had arrived just before the video. A single line of text. From Peter. Don't trust him. Morning came gray and hollow. The house smelled like burnt coffee and sleeplessness. Finally called back. Sorry, he said, voice hoarse. I was busy. Busy doing what? He hesitated, checking something, the cremation files. My pulse quickened and... They're fake, Mom. I nearly dropped the phone. What? The serial number for the urn doesn't exist in the state database. There's no record of Dad's cremation ever happening. So what does that mean? It means either they destroyed the paperwork, or Dad's body was never cremated at all. I sank onto the couch, my knees giving way. So where is he? I don't know, said, but I found a name, the last person who handled the file. Doctor, he runs a private pathology service out near the river. The river? The same river Bob mentioned in the hidden imprint, Stone River Sons Lie. I whispered the words aloud, we're going there. He hesitated, it's dangerous. So is pretending. By noon, we were standing outside a low brick building at the edge of town, the kind of place that pretends to be closed even when it's open. A weathered sign read, Pathology and Preservation. Knocked twice, no answer, he tried again. Finally, the door cracked open. A thin man with steel gray hair and rimless glasses peered out. Can I help you? My husband, I said quickly. Robert, you processed his case 6 months ago. The man's eyes flickered, just a heartbeat but enough. I don't handle individual cases, he said. Stepped forward, we have evidence you signed the cremation order. Doctor went still, then he sighed, stepping aside. You'd better come in. The inside smelled of disinfectant and dust. He motioned to 2 chairs in a small office, then sat opposite us. I knew this day would come, he said quietly. You weren't supposed to find that envelope. My stomach tightened. You knew about it. He nodded. Your husband came to me 3 days before his death, said he'd uncovered something illegal involving his sons. He needed to disappear. The room spun. Disappear. Doctor met my eyes. Mrs., your husband isn't dead. For a long moment, there was only silence. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. His voice cracked. You're saying he faked it? Yes, but not alone. He had help from someone inside the company. I handled the medical paperwork to make the death look legitimate. My chest felt like it might burst. Where is he? I don't know, said. He said he'd be in touch when it was safe. He left me something for you. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small envelope sealed with wax, the same triangle and line symbol pressed into it. For me, I whispered. He nodded. He said you'd understand when the time was right. I took it in trembling hands and broke the seal. Inside was a single photograph, Bob standing on a dock at sunset alive, wearing the same jacket he'd been buried in. On the back were 4 words, written in his handwriting. The river remembers everything. The world slowed down when I saw that photograph. Bob alive, not a memory, not a ghost, alive. The sunset behind him painted everything gold except his expression. He wasn't smiling. His face was tense, eyes focused on something or someone behind the camera. Leaned closer, whispering, when was this taken? Look at the date, I said, flipping it over. Printed faintly in the corner, 3 months after his supposed death. That was when the floor under my life gave way completely. Before I tell you what happened next, take a second, like, subscribe, and share if you've ever had a truth so big it rewrote everything you believed. Because this was the moment my love, my grief, and my motherhood all collided into one impossible question. Who had I really been mourning? Doctor poured himself a cup of coffee with shaking hands. Your husband planned this for weeks. He suspected Caleb and were in danger not just from the fraud but from the people above them, the group they worked for. The Balance Group, I said quietly. He nodded. Yes, a private syndicate disguised as an investment firm. Money laundering, identity manipulation, offshore transfers. Your husband uncovered too much. He said the only way to protect you was to make everyone believe he was dead. My voice came out as a whisper. He left me alone, thinking he was gone while he hid somewhere alive. His gaze softened. He wanted to reach out sooner, but the group, they have eyes everywhere. He didn't trust anyone, not even your sons, especially not Caleb. His face went pale. Dad thought we were part of it. Hesitated. He wasn't sure which of you he could trust. That hurt more than I could stand to watch. He slumped in his chair. I didn't even know what Caleb was doing until it was too late. Turned to me, "Your husband told me something else before he left. He said if you ever came here to tell you to go to the river, the one behind the old mill, there's a small dock. He said it's where everything began and where it would end." The same words from the photo. The river remembers everything. We drove there in silence. The road wound through fog-draped fields until it opened into the old industrial district. The mill had been closed for years, its windows shattered, metal siding rusting like dried blood. The river behind it was calm, eerily so. When I stepped out, the cold hit me like a slap. Followed, scanning the tree line nervously. "Mom, are you sure this is?" "Quiet," I said softly. I walked toward the dock. Each step echoed on the worn wood until I reached the end. The boards groaned beneath me, and I could almost hear Bob's laughter from years ago, the sound of him skipping stones across this very water when the boys were small. I closed my eyes, whispered his name. "Bob, nothing." Then a click. "Tensed, did you hear that?" I turned slowly. On the far side of the dock stood Caleb. "Mom," he said, voice calm, almost gentle, "step away from the water." My pulse spiked. "What are you doing here?" He smiled faintly. "I could ask you the same, following clues from dead men now." Stepped forward. "Don't play dumb, Caleb, we know Dad's alive." That made him laugh, not kindly. "Alive, that's what he told you. That old fool was dead the moment he tried to cross the balance." My throat tightened. "You're lying." He shook his head. "You have no idea what you've stepped into, Mom. That symbol you keep finding, it isn't just a logo, it's a signature. Every account, every fake business, every erased person bears it. Dad helped build it before he had his little change of heart." I froze. "What are you talking about?" "He wasn't innocent," Caleb said. "He started the laundering network years ago. I just kept it running after he retired. He tried to pull out, said he wanted to do the right thing, so they made him disappear." "Made him?" I whispered. "You mean you made him?" He sighed. "You've always needed a villain, Mom. You want it to be me because that's easier than admitting your perfect husband built an empire of corruption. He was one of them." His hands clenched. "That's a lie." Caleb's tone hardened. "Is it? Dad's not the saint you think he is. He left you that photo, didn't he? Always manipulating from the shadows. He's not dead, but he's not hiding from me. He's hiding from you." The words cut deeper than I expected. Shook his head. "No, you killed him, Caleb." Caleb's smirk vanished. "Careful, little brother." He stepped forward, his coat brushing the wind. "You think you're ready to play hero now? You're the one who helped move the money in the first place. You were part of it." "That's not true," snapped. Caleb's eyes flickered with something between pity and cruelty. "You think the balance lets anyone walk away clean? They own both of us. Dad tried to save you. Now he's gone and you're next." I could barely breathe. Two sons, two versions of the same nightmare. One swearing their father was murdered. The other insisting he was the criminal who started it all. Somewhere between them, the truth was bleeding out. Caleb took a slow step toward me. "Give me the USB, Mom." "I don't have it." "Yes, you do." His voice softened, dangerous. "They'll come for you if I don't take care of this. Let me fix it." I shook my head. "You killed him." "I saved us," he hissed. "You have no idea how deep this goes." Lunged forward. "Stay away from her." Caleb's hand flashed inside his jacket. For a heartbeat, I thought he was reaching for a gun, but when his hand came out, it held something worse. A phone, screen lit, camera rolling. He was recording us. "This is for your protection," he said quietly. "You'll thank me later." Moved fast, they grappled, the phone falling to the dock with a splash. Caleb shoved him back hard, his voice breaking. "Don't make me do this." "Do what?" I cried. "What are you hiding?" Caleb looked at me for a long, terrible second, and then whispered, "Ask Dad." And just like that, he ran. Through the fog, across the field, disappearing into the trees before we could follow. Bent over, panting, "Mom, what does he mean?" I looked down at the river. The water rippled gently, disturbed only by the fatting waves of the phone that had sunk beneath it. "Ask Dad," I repeated under my breath. The river remembered everything. I knelt down, staring at the dark water. And for just a moment, I thought I saw it, something glinting beneath the surface. A reflection, a shimmer. No, it was Bob's face. For a long time, I thought I was imagining it. The moonlight on the river played tricks, turning ripples into faces, reflections into ghosts. But as I leaned closer, I saw it again, clear, steady, and real. A shimmer of metal beneath the current, caught between the reeds. I whispered, "There's something down there." He followed my gaze, squinting. It's probably just debris, Mom. No, I said, my voice firm, trembling. It's something he left. If you've ever had a truth claw at your heart so hard that you couldn't look away, you'll understand this moment. Hit like, subscribe, and share, because what I pulled from that water changed everything I believed about death, love, and betrayal. I kicked off my shoes and stepped into the freezing current. Shouted my name, but I didn't stop. The river's chill stabbed through my skin like glass, every nerve screaming. The metal glinted again, half buried in mud. I reached down and grasped it, yanking hard until it came loose. It was a metal briefcase, rusted shut, heavy, engraved with that same triangle and line symbol. When I stumbled back to the bank, was waiting, his hands shaking. Mom, what the hell is that? Something your father wanted me to find, I said, my teeth chattering. The case open with a tire iron from the trunk. Inside were documents, sealed in plastic, perfectly preserved. Beneath them, a small voice recorder. I pressed play. The static gave way to a voice I hadn't heard in half a year. Nora, if you're hearing this, it means they've turned my sons against each other, but you have to understand I did it first. I froze. His eyes met mine, wide with confusion. The balance group wasn't just Caleb's world, it was mine. I built it years ago before you knew what I really did for work. When I tried to dismantle it, they threatened the boys. I couldn't protect all of you at once, so I faked my death to draw them out. If you found this, it's time to finish what I started. Then there was a pause, a deep, tired sigh. Caleb thinks he's in control. He's not, they are, was never part of it. You have to trust him. The rest you'll understand when you find me. The message ended. Whispered, find him, you mean he's alive, he's really alive. I couldn't speak. Tears filled my eyes, but they weren't from joy, they were from rage. Bob had known everything. He had known our sons would destroy each other trying to fix his mistakes. And he'd left me behind to deal with it. I stood, clutching the recorder. He's alive and he's been watching this whole time. Touched my arm gently, Mom. I pulled away. He let me bury an empty casket. He let me grieve him. I know, his voice cracked, but maybe he had no choice. I turned to him sharply. There's always a choice. That night back home, I couldn't sit still. The river smell clung to my clothes, to my skin, to my thoughts. I played the recording again, listening for anything I might missed. And that's when I heard it, a faint sound in the background behind Bob's voice. Waves, wind. And then a bell. A slow, heavy clang echoing between his words. Came into the room when he heard it too. That sound, where is that? I closed my eyes, tracing memory. It's the harbor bell, the one near the old boatyard. He frowned. You think that's where he is? It's where we start, I said. The next morning I packed a bag, documents, recorder, flashlight, and the USB drive still hidden beneath the floorboard. Met me at the door. You sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything, I said, but if we find him, if he's really alive, you let me talk first. Nodded. We drove in silence. The boatyard sat at the edge of town, abandoned and forgotten, swallowed by fog and weeds. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, but someone had cut it recently. We stepped through. The sound of the bell grew louder, slow, haunting, rhythmic. And then I saw it, an old wooden boathouse, door slightly ajar, light flickering inside. Reached for my hand, Mom. I pushed the door open. The smell hit first, oil, damp wood, and something faintly metallic. Inside, the walls were lined with maps, photos, and newspaper clippings pinned in careful order. In the center of the room, a single chair faced a desk covered in documents. And sitting in that chair, back turned to us, was Bob. For a moment, I couldn't move. My body refused to believe what my eyes saw. The man who'd haunted my grief was there, alive, solid, breathing. Bob, I whispered. He turned slowly. His hair was grayer, his face thinner, but the eyes, those same warm, intelligent eyes, looked at me with both relief and guilt. Nora, he said softly, you found me. Stepped forward, Dad, how could you? Bob looked down, because if I hadn't, you'd both be dead by now. From who? I demanded, the balance or from you? He flinched, you don't understand what they can do. Then make me, I said, right now. He met my gaze. It started with one deal, one lie, one compromise, and before I knew it, the money wasn't mine anymore, it was theirs. And the only way to protect this family was to destroy it first. His voice cracked, years of regret folding into a single breath. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could save the boys. You broke us, I whispered. I know. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. His eyes glistened with tears. So what now? Bob looked at me. Now we burn it all down. I stared at Bob's, the man I had buried, mourned, and cursed, and felt my world tilt. Part of me wanted to run to him, to hold him and demand why. But another part, the part that had walked through every shadow he left behind, wanted to scream. How could you? I whispered. Bob stood, his expression torn between relief and shame. You weren't supposed to find me like this. Then how? I said. How was I supposed to find the husband who faked his death and let his family fall apart? He stepped closer, but I raised a hand. Stay where you are, Bob. If you've ever faced someone who betrayed you but claimed it was for love, you'll understand this moment. Hit like, subscribe, and share, and tell me in the comments, could you forgive someone who destroyed your life to save it? Stood frozen, eyes darting between us. Dad, if you're alive, why not come home? Why let Caleb? Bob's face hardened. Because if I came back, you'd all be dead by now. The balance doesn't forgive betrayal. Then why show yourself now? I demanded. He sighed. Because it's time to end this. They've found me again. The words dropped like a stone in water. Found you? I asked. He nodded toward the far wall where a monitor flickered with surveillance feeds. Cameras, live ones, each showing angles of the river, the docks, and even my breath caught the outside of my own house. They've been watching you since the day you opened that box, he said softly. You triggered everything I was trying to protect you from. Clenched his fists, then we fight back. Bob gave him a sad smile. That's what I used to think too. I turned toward the maps covering the walls. Pins marked different cities: Seattle, Chicago, Berlin, Dubai. Red strings connected them in a web that looked too organized to be random. What is all this? I asked. The network, Bob said. Every transfer, every shell company, every partner tied to the balance. It started as a way to hide assets for powerful people, politicians, CEOs, criminals. I thought I could expose it when I learned how deep it went. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized I was one of them. You mean you helped them? I said. Bob's shoulders slumped. I helped them build it. Back then, it was just about moving money, tax loopholes, offshore accounts. But when they started laundering for arms dealers, I wanted out. They said no one leaves. He looked at me then, his eyes haunted. When I discovered Caleb was being groomed to replace me, I tried to pull him out. That's when they came for me. Then Caleb, I began. Believes he's saving us, Bob finished. But he's not in control anymore. He's their puppet now. A faint buzz interrupted us. Bob walked to the desk and pressed a button on a radio receiver. Static, then a voice, cold, clipped, and familiar. It's over, turn yourself in. Bob froze. Caleb, I whispered. The voice continued. You were supposed to stay gone, but since you didn't, they sent me to finish it. His face went white. He's here. Bob grabbed my hand. We have to go. There's a tunnel under the dock. It leads to the storm drains. I used it once before. What about him? I asked, looking toward the door. Bob's voice broke. If we stay, he'll kill us all. We ran. Down the narrow passage behind the boathouse, through a rusted hatch, into the cold tunnels that smelled of rust and river rot. The echo of footsteps followed, too heavy to be just ours. Shouted, he's right behind us. Keep moving, Bob yelled, his flashlight slicing through the dark. We reached a fork. Bob pointed left. This way leads to the service road. But before we could move, a voice echoed through the tunnel. Dad, you can't run from this. Caleb. His silhouette appeared at the far end, gun glinting in the beam of his own light. Mom, he called, his voice shaking, step away from him. I froze. Caleb put it down. He's lying to you, Caleb said. He's always been lying. You think this is about saving us. He's trying to take the balance back. That's not true, Bob shouted. They used you. Liar. The shot echoed like thunder. Pulled me down, the bullet striking the wall inches from Bob's head. Stop, I screamed. But Caleb's face twisted, eyes wild with betrayal and pain. He ruined everything. Then ruin me, Bob said, stepping forward, but leave them out of it. Caleb's hands shook. I can't. And then another shot. Bob stumbled, hand to his side. Dad cried, catching him as he fell. The flashlight clattered to the floor, rolling to rest against the tunnel wall. In its beam, I saw blood blooming beneath Bob's fingers. Go, Bob rasped, both of you. I'm not leaving you again, I said. He smiled weakly. You already did once, you'll survive this too. Dad, please, begged, we can get you out. Bob's hand found mine, squeezing once hard. The drive will destroy it. If they get it, they win. And then, before I could say anything else, his hand went limp. I turned to Caleb, tears streaming down my face. What have you done? His expression collapsed. I didn't mean. But before he could finish, the roar of engines echoed above us. Lights flashed through the cracks in the ceiling. Pulled me up, they're here, we have to move. We ran through the other tunnel, leaving behind the man who had broken us, saved us, and died for us twice. By the time we reached the surface, dawn had begun to break. The world looked the same, but everything inside me was different. Was silent beside me, his clothes streaked with mud and blood. Neither of us spoke as we walked toward the car. When I looked back, the boathouse was already burning. Smoke curled into the dawn sky like a black ribbon, twisting above the water where the boathouse used to stand. The sound of burning timber echoed across the river, sharp, final, unforgiving. I watched the flames devour what was left of Bob's hiding place, and for a moment I wondered if this was his last gift to me. A clean ending to a story too tangled to survive. Stood beside me, silent, hollow-eyed. He looked older in the light, like the boy I'd raised had finally burned away, leaving only the man who had seen too much. Mom, he whispered, we should go, someone will come. I didn't move, someone already has. Behind us, engines rumbled, sirens wailed in the distance. We were out of time. Before I tell you what came next, hit like, subscribe, and share, because what happens when a family's secrets catch fire isn't just destruction, it's rebirth. Tell me in the comments, would you run from the truth or walk through the flames to face it? Two black SUVs screeched to a stop on the dirt road. Men in tactical vests spilled out, their movements too precise to be police. The symbol, the balanced triangle, was stitched on their shoulders. Grabbed my wrist, run. We sprinted toward the trees, mud pulling at our shoes, branches clawing our faces. A gunshot cracked behind us, then another. The air hissed as bullets sliced through the fog. Keep going, shouted. My lungs burned, my vision blurred. Every breath tasted like smoke and fear. A hand grabbed my arm, pulling me behind a fallen log. We can't outrun them, he panted. We have to hide until they leave. But I knew they wouldn't. They had already lost one tonight. They wouldn't leave without taking another. We crouched in silence, the sound of boots crunching on gravel drawing closer. I reached into my coat pocket, feeling the shape of the USB drive pressing against my palm. Bob's final command echoed in my head, destroy it. But could I? That drive held the truth, proof of everything. Without it, the balance would keep erasing people like us. A shadow passed overhead, voices murmured. Target down in the tunnel, 2 unaccounted for. Search the woods, orders are to retrieve the drive intact. Mouthed, they know about it. I nodded, my fingers tightening around it. Then they can't have it. The next moments blurred together. Through a rock to distract them, we crawled toward the old service road. A shot whizzed past, close enough to tear the edge of my sleeve. I stumbled, fell, but pulled me up again. When we finally reached the car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key in the ignition. Go, shouted. The tires screeched, mud flying as we sped toward the highway. Only when the road straightened did I realize I was still clutching the drive like a lifeline. We drove for an hour before spoke. Mom, we need help, we can't do this alone. There's no one left to trust, I said. He hesitated. What about Peter? I glanced at him. You think he wasn't part of this? He shook his head. He helped Dad fake the death, yes, but maybe not for the balance. Maybe he did it for you. The thought twisted something deep inside me. I turned off the highway toward the small funeral office where Peter worked. The parking lot was empty, the building dark except for a single light in his office. He opened the door before I could knock. His eyes widened when he saw me, mud-streaked, trembling, eyes raw. Nora, he said quietly, I heard about the fire. Then you know he's gone, I whispered. Peter's jaw tightened. I figured as much, come in. Followed, glancing around. We don't have much time, they're coming. Peter shut the door. I know. What do you mean, you know? I demanded. He looked at me with that same weary calm I had once mistaken for kindness. Because they contacted me too. For a heartbeat, the room spun. What did you tell them? Asked, voice rising. Peter sighed, the truth that I had no idea where the drive was, which is true until now. His eyes flicked to my hand. You have it, don't you? I backed away. You're not taking it. He raised his hands. Nora, listen, I'm not with them. I've been feeding them false leads for months, trying to buy you time, but they know everything now. If we don't expose them tonight, they'll vanish again. How? Asked. The police are compromised. Not all of them, Peter said. There's one contact left, a federal investigator. She's been waiting for proof. We get her this drive and we end it. It sounded impossible, but in that moment, impossible was all we had. Peter moved to his computer, connecting a secure channel. We can send the files directly, but once we do, they'll trace it. We'll have to run. I've been running my whole life, I said quietly. Not anymore. He glanced at me. Are you sure? I nodded. Send it. The upload began. Progress bar crawling 1%, 2%, 3%. Then the lights flickered. Peter's face went pale. They're already in the system. Can you finish it? I asked. Maybe if I buy us time. He reached for the phone, locked the doors. Moved to the front of the office while I stayed beside Peter, watching the numbers tick upward. 7%, 10%, 12%. Gunfire shattered the windows. Dove to the ground. They're here. Peter shouted, keep it uploading, as he drew a gun from his drawer. I dropped behind the desk, shielding my head as bullets tore through the office walls. The progress bar hit 20%. Then the power went out. Darkness swallowed the room, smoke filled the air. Peter grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the back exit. They'll kill us for that drive, we can't stay. But the upload… Forget it, it's over. He kicked open the rear door, shoving me in outside. We stumbled into the alley, rain pouring down in heavy sheets. Behind us, a muffled explosion rocked the building, fire and glass erupting into the night. Screamed Peter, but there was no answer. Only flames. We ran until my legs gave out, collapsing beneath a flickering streetlight. I looked down. The USB drive was still in my hand, charred but intact. And above the roar of rain, I could sworn I heard it again, Bob's voice echoing in my mind. If they get it, they wins. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. It fell against the motel windows in a steady rhythm, a sound that felt almost alive, like the world was whispering reminders of everything I'd lost. Sat by the door, staring at the soaked parking lot outside. His clothes were still damp, his eyes hollow. Neither of us had slept since the explosion. I'd replayed it 100 times, Peter's shout, the shattering glass, the roar of the fire, the way the night turned to chaos in a single heartbeat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Bob's hand slipping from mine in the tunnel. And I heard his final words again. Destroy it. If you've ever been trapped between what's right and what's left of your soul, you'll understand this silence. Before I continue, subscribe and share this story because the next choice I made would cost me everything I had left. On the second night, finally spoke. Mom, what if Peter was right? What if that drive really is our only chance? I stared at the flash drive on the nightstand. The plastic casing was melted on one side, cracked like a wound that wouldn't close. He's dead, I said quietly. Because of this thing, your father died for it too. How many more have to? His voice broke. Then what are we supposed to do? Run forever? I turned toward the rain, watching the reflection of the motel sign flicker in the puddles. I don't know, I whispered, but I can't lose you too. He looked at me then, not as my son, but as the man Bob used to be, determined, reckless. I'm not going anywhere, he said. But I could see it in his eyes. He already had a plan. The next morning, I woke to an empty room. His backpack was gone, the drive was gone. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I ran outside barefoot, the cold rain slicing my skin. The parking lot was empty, except for a note taped to the windshield of our car. Mom, I'm going to finish what Dad started. Don't follow me. The letters blurred as the rain soaked the page. I fell to my knees in the mud, clutching that note like a lifeline. No, I whispered, not again. For hours, I drove aimlessly. Every road looked the same, gray, endless, hollow. My thoughts circled like vultures. Where would he go? Who would he trust? Then I remembered something Bob had said in the recording. If you find me, it means they've turned my sons against each other. My chest tightened. That was already happening. And if Caleb found first? I slammed the gas pedal. By nightfall, I reached the old industrial district by the docks, the same area Bob used to take us to when he worked night shifts years ago. It was quiet now. Abandoned warehouses lined the street, their windows glowing faintly under the sodium lights. And then I saw it, a black van parked outside one of the old shipping offices. I recognized the symbol spray-painted on its door, the balanced triangle. My heart sank. I killed the headlights and parked down the street. Rain pounded the windshield as I grabbed the flashlight from the glove compartment. The office door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and oil. A faint light flickered deeper in the hall. I followed it. At the far end, a large room opened into what looked like a temporary command post, laptops, cables, weapons, maps. And there, at the center of it all, was Caleb. He was older now, colder. The boy I'd raised had become something sharp and hollow. And across from him, tied to a chair, was Mom shouted as soon as he saw me. Caleb turned, startled. His expression flickered from shock to disbelief. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you, I said, stepping forward. Let him go. Caleb shook his head. He stole something that doesn't belong to him. I looked at the desk behind him. The USB drive sat connected to a laptop, a progress bar glowing faintly on the screen. What are you doing? I demanded. I'm finishing Dad's work, Caleb said, but my way. I moved closer. Your way, you think he wanted this? Caleb's jaw tightened. He wanted to destroy them. I'm giving them what they deserve, exposure, chaos. When this upload is done, every encrypted file, every name, every dollar they ever hid will go public. Struggled against the ropes. That's not what Dad wanted. You'll put targets on everyone they ever worked with, innocent people too. Caleb ignored him. They all chose to be part of it. I stepped closer, tears mixing with the rain dripping from my hair. Caleb, please don't do this. He turned to me then, his voice trembling. You of all people should want this. They took him from us. They took everything. And he died trying to protect you, I said. Don't throw that away. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw the old Caleb again, the one who used to fix my radio, who laughed too loud, who hugged too long. But then the laptop beeped. Upload complete, he whispered. My heart dropped. The screen flashed once, then went dark. A message appeared, transfer successful. Caleb exhaled, shoulders slumping. It's done. And then the building lights cut out. Gunfire erupted outside. Caleb spun toward the door, eyes wide. They found us. Shouted, cut me loose. I grabbed a knife from the desk and sliced through the ropes, my hands shaking. The front windows shattered as armed men stormed in. The balance's insignia gleamed on their armor. Get down, I screamed. Caleb returned fire, diving for cover behind a steel crate, pulled me behind a column. The sound was deafening, bullets ricocheting, glass exploding, voices shouting commands. Take them alive, someone yelled. I caught Caleb's eye across the chaos. Run, he mouthed. And then an explosion ripped through the room. When I opened my eyes, the air was thick with dust and smoke. Was beside me, coughing. The walls were cracked, flames licking at the ceiling. Caleb, I screamed. There was no answer, only fire. Dragged me out as the roof began to collapse. We stumbled into the street, sirens wailing in the distance. Behind us, the building burned. And somewhere in that inferno, I lost another piece of my family. The morning after the fire, the world looked washed out, gray skies, cold drizzle, the kind of silence that presses on your chest. I sat in a white interrogation room with a single window and a cup of untouched coffee. My hands still smelled like smoke. They'd brought me here after the explosion, men in suits, no insignias. Federal agents, they said. But I could tell by the way they avoided eye contact that even they didn't know what to make of me. One of them, a woman named Agent Riley, finally spoke. Mrs., you were found near a federal crime scene. Your son is being held for questioning. The other, Caleb, was not recovered. Not recovered, I asked quietly, or not found? She didn't answer. Instead, she slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs, the burned warehouse, blackened laptops, fragments of the Balance's logo melted into the concrete. And then a final photo, the USB drive. You recognize this? She asked. I stared at it for a long time. I've spent my whole life trying to destroy that thing, I said, and now it's finally doing what it always wanted. If you've ever lived through something that stripped away your illusions and made you wonder who you were without them, then you know what it's like to sit in that kind of silence. Like, subscribe, and share this story if you believe truth always costs more than lies. Agent Riley leaned forward. The data that was uploaded from that drive, it wasn't what anyone expected. What do you mean? It wasn't a financial leak, it was personal. She opened another file, pages of letters, journal entries, recordings, all written by Bob. My throat tightened. What is this? Your husband left an archive, not of transactions or clients, but of people, witnesses, families, evidence that the Balance wasn't just a laundering network. It was a protection program, one that used criminal money to hide those who had been killed for speaking out. I blinked. You're saying my husband was protecting people? She nodded, including himself. I couldn't speak. For months, I'd painted Bob as a coward, a liar, a man who'd chosen secrets over family. But now, sitting under the fluorescent lights, I saw the truth from a different angle. He hadn't disappeared to save himself, he disappeared to save us. Agent Riley studied me carefully. Mrs., there's something else. The archive also named your sons, both of them. I froze. What? She slid another page toward me. Caleb was recruited into the balance at 18, but was flagged years ago as a risk. Your husband tried to protect him by keeping him in the dark, but when Caleb uploaded the archive last night, everything went public. Every name, every file. Us name too. Yes, he's now marked as a liability. My pulse spiked. Then he's in danger. Riley nodded grimly. We can protect you both, witness security, new identities, but you'll have to leave everything and everyone behind. When she left me alone to think, I stared at the rain running down the window. It reminded me of that first storm, the day Bob's coffin was lowered into the ground. Only now I wondered what else had been buried with him. I thought about Caleb, his anger, his pain, his need to make meaning out of loss. I thought about how much of his father's conscience he carried in him. And then I thought about myself. For years, I had been the center that held them all together. Now I was the last thing standing in the wreckage of their choices. They moved us out that night, me and unmarked van, tinted windows, no words. As we drove, I looked at him, the boy who'd once been afraid of thunderstorms. Now he sat with his jaw clenched, watching the world disappear behind us. You did the right thing, I said softly. He didn't look at me. Then why does it feel like we lost everything? Because sometimes doing right feels like dying, I said, but it's still the only way to stay alive. We reached a safe house miles outside the city, a small farmhouse surrounded by mist and pine. The agents left us with a single phone, a new set of IDs, and instructions to stay quiet until contacted. For the first time in months, the silence wasn't dangerous. It was heavy but safe. That night I stood on the porch, staring at the stars through the fog. Somewhere out there, Caleb was either dead or running. And somewhere deeper still, the truth was unraveling faster than any of us could stop it. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee. Sat at the table, newspaper in hand. The headline made my breath hitch. Global data leak EXPOSES underground network, known as the Balance. Dozens of arrests made worldwide, identities of thousands revealed. I sat down slowly. It's out. Nodded, all of it. And Caleb. He hesitated. They're calling him the. My heart clenched. Then he's alive. Looked at me, 1,000 thoughts in his eyes. Mom, he might not be for long. Outside, the wind shifted. A storm was coming again. But this time, I wasn't going to hide. The storm rolled in before dawn, carried on a wind that sounded like whispers through the trees. I stood by the window of the farmhouse, watching the horizon vanish under sheets of rain. Every drop against the glass sounded like a countdown to something I didn't yet understand. Was asleep on the couch, exhaustion finally winning after days of running. His chest rose and fell steadily. I that peace. Because for me, peace had become unnatural, something that felt like silence before the next explosion. I turned the small USB drive over in my hand. It was cracked, scorched, but still intact. The same drive that had cost Bob his life, destroyed Caleb, and dragged me into the ashes. I thought it was over when the leak went public, but somehow, deep in my chest, I knew it was. Because the story didn't feel finished. Not yet. If you believe secrets never truly die, they just change hands, then this next part is for you. Like, subscribe, and share before we go further, because what I found next changed everything I thought I knew about love, loss, and loyalty. At 6:45 a.m., the phone on the kitchen counter rang. It was the disposable phone Agent Riley had left behind, one number programmed into it. Mrs., her voice came through tight, urgent. Don't leave the house, we're coming to move you again. What happened? I asked. Someone accessed the backup archive from an internal server. It wasn't your son, it was someone using your name. I froze. My name. Yes, your maiden name, Nora. The system flagged it before we could stop it. Whoever it is, they knew exactly what to look for. The line crackled, then went dead. I stood in silence, the phone still pressed to my ear. My maiden name. No one outside my family should have known that, not even Bob's colleagues. He'd always been careful to keep my identity out of his files. So how could anyone use it now? I turned back toward the table, and that's when I saw it. The USB drive, which I'd set beside's coffee mug, was gone. I called out. No answer. The couch was empty, his jacket was missing, so were the car keys. I ran to the window, just in time to see the tail lights disappear down the foggy dirt road. He'd left me again, just like his father. But where was he going and why? Then I noticed something strange, a folded piece of paper taped to the refrigerator. My name written on it, Mom's. My hands shook as I opened it. I'm sorry, but I had to know the truth. Peter wasn't the only one hiding things. The drive has another partition locked under your name. Dad left it for you, and I think it's what the balance was protecting all along. If I don't come back, know that I love you. I sank into a chair, my pulse hammering. Another partition hidden under my name. Bob had left me more secrets even after death. I drove for hours through the rain, following the GPS ping Riley had once shown me, the encrypted tracking they'd placed on his phone. Each mile deeper into the storm felt like driving back through time, every fight, every loss, every lie replaying itself. When the signal finally stopped, it was outside an abandoned observatory on the ridge, one of the old government facilities decommissioned years ago. I parked, stepped out, and climbed the hill. Lightning split the sky in jagged lines. The observatory door hung half open. Inside, water dripped from the ceiling into dark puddles. The air smelled of rust and rain. And there, by the central telescope, stood. He turned as I entered. His hair was soaked, his expression unreadable. You shouldn't have come, he said quietly. Neither should you, I replied. He looked down at the laptop glowing beside him. I found it, Dad's hidden partition. What's inside? He hesitated. You should see for yourself. I approached slowly, heart pounding. On the screen, a series of folders appeared, labeled Project ELLISON. My maiden name again. I clicked the first file. It was a video. The image flickered, then steadied. Bob sat in his office, pale but calm. His voice was steady, though his eyes looked haunted. Nora, if you're watching this, it means you found the second archive. The truth I couldn't tell anyone, not even our sons. I gripped the edge of the desk. The balance wasn't just something I infiltrated, it was something I helped create. The air left my lungs. We built it years ago before I met you, a covert system to protect assets and people who carried dangerous truths. It was supposed to save lives, not destroy them. But over time, the money changed everything. The mission was corrupted. I left, tried to shut it down, but they followed me. When I married you, I thought I'd escaped it. I was wrong. He paused, looking directly into the camera. Nora, you were one of the first protected identities, the daughter of a journalist who exposed one of the early funders. They killed your parents to silence the story. You were placed under a new name, a new life. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with you, but I did, and when they found out, they tried to erase both of us. I staggered back, shaking my head. No, that can't be. Caught my arm. Mom, it's all here. Dad was trying to protect you the entire time. The screen flickered again. If the balance survives, they'll come for you next. That's why I left this second archive. It contains the names of everyone who built the system, including me. If you release it, the network will collapse completely, but you'll also expose yourself. You'll lose everything, Nora, even your name. The video cut to static. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The storm roared outside, thunder shaking the building. Finally, whispered, what do we do now? I stared at the flickering screen, the folder that held my past, my parents' murder, the foundation of the life I'd lived for 71 years. I think, I said slowly, we finish what your father started, but this time on my terms. Outside, lightning split the sky again, and for the first time I didn't flinch. Because now, I finally understood what Bob had meant in his letter. You are the key. And the lock was about to break. The storm didn't let up that night. It howled like an animal, clawing at the roof of the observatory as if it wanted in. But for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of the noise. I was afraid of the silence that would follow it, the silence after the truth came out. Sat beside the flickering monitor, his hands clenched into fists. The glow of the screen painted his face in pale light. Neither of us had spoken since Bob's message ended. The words hung in the air like ghosts we couldn't banish. My entire life, every memory, every story I'd ever told about who I was had been built on a lie. I wasn't just a wife or a mother or a victim of circumstance. I was the daughter of a dead journalist whose truth had been buried under layers of corruption and fear. And Bob had known it all along. If you've ever had the ground pulled out from under you, if you've ever discovered that the people who saved you also lied to you, then you understand the storm that lives inside me right now. Before we go further, subscribe and share this story because what happens next isn't just about revenge. It's about becoming the person the world tried to erase. I can't believe he never told you, said finally, breaking the quiet. His voice was steady, but his eyes were wet. He carried all this alone. I nodded slowly. He thought he was protecting us, but protection built on secrets always becomes a cage. Looked down at the laptop. Mom, the archive, if we release this, you'll lose your identity, everything you've built. I exhaled shakily. It's already gone, it was never really mine. He turned to me sharply. So what, you just let them take the rest, you let them win. No, I said softly, this time we take everything back. I walked to the window, the rain streaking down like silver veins. Through the glass, I could see flashes of lightning illuminating the hills. Each flash felt like a camera shutter, capturing the last image of the world before it changed forever. Bob always said truth is like water, I murmured. You can block it, bury it, poison it, but eventually it finds a way to surface. Join me at the window, so we release it. Yes, I said, turning to him, but not the way Caleb did, not with chaos or anger, we do it strategically, piece by piece. We expose them and protect the people Dad was trying to save. Hesitated, do you think that's even possible? I smiled faintly. Your father believed in balance, maybe this is how we finally bring it. We spent the rest of the night studying the files. Each document was a thread in a web so large it seemed impossible to untangle. Politicians, corporations, intelligence agencies, all tied to one invisible system of control. But among all the data, one folder caught my eye. It was labeled Echo Protocol. Inside were encrypted messages, some signed only with initials, others timestamped decades apart. And one message, dated just a month before Bob's death, carried a sender name that made my blood run cold. C. Caleb. My maiden name. Mom said quietly, that's him, Caleb. I shook my head. No, it's not your brother, it's someone else. Then who? I clicked the file. A voice message began to play, distorted but familiar, a woman's voice, calm and deliberate. If you're hearing this, Nora, it means Bob kept his promise. I've been watching over you for years through the Balance Network. I knew this day would come. When it does, find the message titled The Garden. That's where it all began. The message ended. Who was that? Whispered. I don't know, I said, though my heart knew I did. The voice had an echo I couldn't mistake. It was my mother. The realization struck me like lightning. My mother, the woman whose death had supposedly been covered up by the Balance, was alive when Bob created the system. She had been part of it. And she had left a message for me. I searched the drive until I found it, a small encrypted file named The Garden. When I opened it, a single image appeared, an address. A community garden on the outskirts of the city. The place where my mother had been found dead 47 years ago. His hand tightened around mine. You're not thinking of going there, are you? I have to, I said. That's where the story ends or begins. We packed what little we had, the laptop, the drive, a flashlight, and left the observatory before dawn. The road wound down the ridge, slick with rain. The world felt like it was holding its breath. Halfway through the drive, I remembered something Bob used to say. Every truth has a grave. You just have to decide whether to dig it up or let it stay buried. I looked at the determination in his eyes that reminded me so much of his father. We're going to dig it up, I said. He nodded, then let's finish it. When we reached the city, the storm had finally broken. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke. The garden was overgrown now, vines curling around rusted benches, flowers blooming through cracks in the concrete. It was beautiful in a forgotten kind of way. I walked toward the old oak tree in the center, the same one I remembered from my childhood photographs. Beneath it was a small brass plaque, tarnished with age. The name engraved on it was my mother. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then pointed at something half buried near the base of the tree, a small metal box, green with rust. We dug it out together, the soil damp and heavy. Inside was a single cassette tape wrapped in plastic, labeled simply, for Nora. I stared at it, trembling. She knew I'd come back. Smiled faintly. Looks like Grandma left you a message. We didn't have a cassette player, but I knew where to find one. The library downtown, the same place my mother had taken me when I was 5. It had burned down years ago, but part of it had been rebuilt as a historical archive. By the time we reached it, the sun had risen. Light filtered through the dusty windows, painting the floor in amber and gold. I slid the tape into an old player, pressed play, and waited. For a moment there was only static. Then a woman's voice, warm, tired, and achingly familiar, filled the room. My dearest Nora, if you're hearing this, then you've survived what I could not. I need you to know the truth about who you are and why the world was never supposed to find out. The next few minutes would unravel the last threads of my old life and set the stage for everything that came next. The tape hissed softly, and my mother's voice filled the room, fragile, tender, yet laced with something sharp beneath. Nora, my sweet girl, you were never meant to find this, but I always knew you would. Truth, my dear, runs in our blood. No matter how deep they bury it, it grows roots. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the old desk. Stood beside me, eyes locked on the cassette player, afraid to even breathe. I worked with your father, not Bob, the man who raised you, but the journalist who gave you life. His name was Samuel. He uncovered something that could have rewritten history, a secret society that fed on power and fear. When they silenced him, I ran. I thought I could keep you safe, but they found me too. She paused, and I could hear her take a slow, shaky breath. That's when he appeared, Robert, a man with kind eyes and a haunted soul. He promised to protect you and me. But to do it, we had to disappear. So we built the balance not as criminals, but as guardians. We traded money for silence, favors for safety. It was supposed to be temporary, but greed always finds its way in. The sound of rain outside felt synchronized with her voice, as though time itself was listening. If you've ever realized your entire life was built on someone else's sacrifice, stay with me. Before we uncover what my mother truly meant, like, subscribe and share this story. Because what she said next would change everything I believed about love, betrayal, and redemption. They turned the balance into a machine of control. Bob tried to stop it, but by then it was too late. Every secret we'd buried had become a weapon. Every name we'd protected became leverage. So I made one final deal, my life for yours. I closed my eyes. Oh, Mom. If you're hearing this, Nora, it means Bob kept his promise. It means you survived, but there's one thing he never told you because he couldn't. The balance doesn't just protect secrets, it creates them. It rewrites reality. It controls narratives, governments, news, history itself. Every major event you've lived through was shaped, edited, or buried by them. The tape clicked once as if even it needed to breathe. And now, my daughter, you hold the final key. Your birth name's legacy is the access code to erase the balance completely. But if you do it, every protected life, every hidden truth, every rewritten page will surface at once. The world will burn before it heals. Her voice softened. Choose wisely, Nora. Justice and mercy rarely live in the same heart. Then silence. The tape stopped spinning. For a moment, all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Finally exhaled, the sound almost a sob. Mom, what does this mean? I stared at the tape. It means we have a choice, the same one my mother and Bob had, truth or survival. He shook his head. You can't destroy everything, Mom. There are people out there who still need protection. And there are others who built empires on lies, I said quietly, people who killed for them. Ran a hand through his hair. If you release everything, you'll expose the innocent too. I know. So what do we do? I looked out the window where dawn was just beginning to bleed through the clouds, gray, hesitant, uncertain. For the first time, I said, we stop running, we decide. We left the library in silence, the tape still clutched in my hand. The city outside felt different now, raw, trembling, as if it sensed what I carried. Walked a few paces ahead, his shoulders tight. When he turned, I saw my reflection in his eyes, a woman who'd lost everything but still carried the power to destroy worlds. We can't do this alone, he said. If the balance built the system, maybe someone out there can dismantle it safely. Who? I asked. He hesitated. Agent Riley. My stomach tightened. You think we can trust her? I think, he said, we don't have a choice. That night, we reached out using the secure line Riley had left us. When she answered, her voice was calm, too calm. Mrs., I wondered when you'd call. You knew, didn't you? I asked. About my mother, about me. She didn't deny it. I knew pieces, not the whole picture, but now you do, and that means you have something the balance will kill to retrieve. Leaned closer to the phone, then help us stop them. Riley paused, then said, meet me tomorrow, 3 p.m., the old radio tower off Route 19. Bring the drive and the tape. And then the line went dead. As the night deepened, I lay awake, the tape beside me on the pillow. For the first time in decades, I felt the presence of my mother and Bob not as memories, but as guardians, two halves of the same truth. They had both tried to protect me. Now it was my turn to protect their legacy. But a thought wouldn't leave me, a single haunting question that echoed like thunder in my chest. If the balance could rewrite reality, what else in my life had they already changed? The drive to the old radio tower felt longer than it should have. The air was heavy with the kind of silence that comes before something irreversible. Kept both hands on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the endless gray horizon, while I held the small cassette in my lap like it was a living thing. Every mile we passed felt like crossing out another page of our lives, the ones that had made sense, the ones that still had warmth. The closer we got to the tower, the colder it became. I remembered the first time Bob drove me through these same roads decades ago. He pointed at the tower and said, "Signals never really disappear, Nora. They just bounce around the world until someone's ready to hear them." Today, I was finally ready. If you've ever gone to meet someone believing it might change everything or end everything, you'll understand what it felt like walking into that storm. Before the truth comes to light, like, subscribe, and share this story. Because what I discovered that day broke my heart and rebuilt it in the same breath. The radio tower rose out of the fog like a skeleton against the sky, tall, rusted, its steel ribs humming in the wind. There was a single car parked nearby, a black SUV with tinted windows. "Stay here," I told. He shook his head. "No way." "Mom, if this goes bad, you're not facing it alone." I looked at him and realized that no matter how much I wanted to protect him, the boy was gone. The man beside me had inherited his father's courage and his mother's stubbornness. So we went together. Agent Riley was waiting at the base of the tower, her coat whipping in the wind. She looked smaller somehow, or maybe just tired. "Mrs.," she said as we approached. "Agent," I replied cautiously, "you said you wanted the drive and the tape." Her eyes flicked to the bag in my hand. "Do you have them?" I nodded. "Before I hand them over, I want the truth, all of it." She exhaled, her breath visible in the cold air. "You deserve that." Stepped forward, "Then start talking." Riley hesitated, scanning the horizon as if making sure we were alone. Then she said quietly, "Your mother, Nora, she wasn't the only one who helped build the balance. There were others, but one in particular who stayed behind after everyone else tried to leave." "Who?" I asked. "Me." The word hit like a gunshot. "You," I whispered. "Yes," she said, "I was one of the original architects. Back then it wasn't called the Balance. It was Project Seraph, a contingency network meant to preserve truth during global crises. But when money entered the equation, everything changed. I tried to leave. Your husband did too, but by then it had a life of its own." "Was jaw tightened, you used us." "No," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I protected you. You think I didn't know who you were, Nora. You were the child of the only journalist who came close to exposing the truth. We couldn't let history repeat itself." I stepped closer. "And now, why bring us here? Why not finish what you started?" Riley's eyes glistened. "Because I can't destroy something I created, but you can." She held out a small device, a remote detonator with a single red button. "What is this?" asked. "Bob and I built a," she said. "If the drive and the tape are combined, they trigger a recursive purge through every balance server in existence. Total erasure, every record, every secret gone. But once it's done, there's no undoing it." I stared at the device in my palm. It felt heavier than it should. Riley lowered her voice. "You'll be erasing history itself. Some truths might deserve that mercy." Looked at me, waiting for my decision. That's when we heard it, the crunch of gravel behind us. A voice called out, low and familiar. "Or maybe some truths deserve punishment." We turned, and there he was. Caleb. Alive. He looked rough, beard grown, eyes sunken, but alive. Rain plastered his hair to his face, and a faint scar crossed his cheek. "Caleb," I whispered. He smiled bitterly. "You really thought I'd die that easily?" Moved toward him. "You blew up a building, Caleb. You could killed Mom." "I was trying to protect her," Caleb shouted back. "You think the Balance was going to stop hunting us just because we went into hiding? They wanted her, they always did." He turned to me, his eyes blazing. "They built the system around you, Mom. You're the control variable, the one they needed to balance everything else. Without you, it collapses. That's why Dad couldn't destroy it. That's why I had to do what I did." Riley stepped forward. "He's not wrong." I turned to her sharply. "You knew." "I suspected. Bob told me once, if Nora dies, the Balance dies with her. Her name, her DNA, her identity, they were used as encryption keys. She is the code." My knees weakened, caught me before I fell. "You mean," I whispered, "to destroy the Balance, I have to die?" Caleb nodded, eyes glistening. That's why Dad left it for you to decide. He couldn't choose between truth and love, he left it for you, Mom. Riley's voice was quiet. You don't have to die, there might be another way, but it will take time and they're coming right now. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Red lights glowed in the fog. Caleb pulled a small pistol from his jacket and aimed it toward the horizon. They tracked me here, you have minutes. Reached for the detonator in my hand. Mom, we can still run. No, I said, my voice steady. Running is what started this, I won't do it again. The fog thickened around us, swallowing sound. Riley shouted over the rising wind, Nora, if you trigger it, you'll erase everything they ever built, but you'll vanish with it. There won't be any record of you, not even a memory in the system. I looked at my sons, one broken by vengeance, one bound by hope. Both reflections of the man I'd loved. And I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. I'm done being a secret, I said softly. Then I pressed the button. The world seemed to stop. A low hum filled the air, deep and resonant, vibrating through the tower's steel bones. The sky lit up, not with lightning, but with data, glowing lines of light flickering across the clouds like constellations coming undone. Caleb shouted something, but his voice was drowned in the roar. Pulled me close as the ground trembled. And then everything went white. When the light faded, the world felt eerily still. No rain, no wind, just silence. I opened my eyes and realized I was lying on damp grass near the tower's base. The structure itself was gone, melted into a twisted skeleton of black steel. The fog that had blanketed the hill had vanished, too, replaced by a clear, pale dawn. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The detonator lay beside me, its light dark and lifeless. His voice came from somewhere behind me, hoarse, frantic. Mom, Mom. I turned my head slowly. He stumbled through the rubble, blood streaking down his cheek, eyes wide with terror. I'm here, I whispered. When he saw me, he fell to his knees beside me, trembling. You're alive, oh my God, you're alive. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that everything was over, but the words caught in my throat, because even as I looked at him, something felt wrong. The air around us shimmered faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. And the city in the distance, the skyline I'd known all my life, looked different. The world had shifted. If you've ever destroyed something terrible only to wonder what it might rebuild itself into, this part is for you. Before I go on, subscribe and share this story, because what came after that explosion wasn't peace. It was a new kind of war, one built on the ashes of truth. Riley was gone, so was Caleb. All that remained were faint scorch marks in the grass and a smell like burnt ozone. Mom said softly, staring toward the horizon, what did you do? I finished it, I said, though the words sounded hollow. I erased the balance. But as the sun climbed higher, it became clear that erasing something that big didn't mean it stopped existing. It simply rewrote itself into something else. The first signs appeared an hour later. We reached the outskirts of the city and found the roads full of confusion. Police scanners buzzed with static, people shouted at dead phones, cars sat motionless at intersections where traffic lights had gone dark. Every system, every database, every network was down. Hospitals, banks, even air traffic control. I heard a man yelling on a corner radio, it's a blackout global, all digital records wiped. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. Mom, the purge, it's everywhere. I stared out the window, the city unfolding in chaos around us. People running, screens flickering, the hum of civilization dimming into panic. I didn't just destroy the balance, I whispered. I destroyed the world that relied on it. By nightfall, we found shelter in a small church on the outskirts, candles glowing against the stained glass. Dozens of people huddled there, whispering prayers or crying quietly. No one recognized me. No one remembered me. A priest approached, kind-eyed and soft-spoken. You look lost, he said gently. I suppose I am, I replied. Do you know what's happening? He sighed, some say it's judgment, others say it's freedom. His words lingered in the candlelight. Freedom and judgment, two sides of the same coin. That night, as slept on a pew, I walked outside and looked at the stars. They were brighter than I'd ever seen them, sharp, alive, untouched by the glow of vanished cities. And then I heard footsteps behind me. Beautiful, isn't it? The voice was familiar, calm, unmistakable. I turned and there stood Riley. Her clothes were scorched, her hair windblown, but her eyes were steady. You survived, I said quietly. So did you, she replied. That means the system's gone, but the key remains. What do you mean? She stepped closer. The purge wiped data, not memory. Every person who ever was part of the balance still exists, but their connections, their records, their leverage, all gone. You've leveled the playing field, and that means they'll start rebuilding from scratch. I stared at her, then it was for nothing. No, she said softly. It was everything. You didn't end corruption, Nora, you ended its certainty. Behind us, the church bell rang once, an eerie, accidental sound from the shifting wind. Riley looked up at it and smiled faintly. I have to go, she said. There are survivors who will come looking for me. Will I see you again? She hesitated. If you do, I won't be the same person. None of us will be. Then she disappeared into the mist. I stood there for a long time, alone with the stars, and finally understood what Bob and my mother had meant by balance. It was never about perfection. It was about motion, loss, truth, consequence, rebirth. I had become the fracture through which light could enter. And now it was up to the world to decide what to do with it. When I went back inside, stirred in his sleep, I brushed his hair from his forehead, a gesture I'd done since he was a boy. You saved us, I whispered. Now it's our turn to save them. But even as I said it, I felt the truth pressing at the edges of my mind, the part I hadn't told him. If my DNA really was the encryption key, the world might come for me again. Not to silence me, but to rebuild what I destroyed. And I wasn't sure I had the strength to fight another storm. By the time the third dawn came after the purge, the world had shifted from chaos to something eerily calm. No internet, no banks, no digital trails. People were walking again, trading, helping, stealing, surviving. And I stayed near the church for a few days, helping where we could. We cooked for strangers, carried buckets of water, and handed out candles when night fell. Every act of kindness felt sacred in a world that had lost its memory. But I could feel it, that creeping edge of order trying to take root again. Whispers of groups forming, old power figures gathering followers. The same disease, just waiting for a new name. And the moment I heard someone mention the new balance, I knew it had begun. If you've ever destroyed something evil only to realize evil doesn't die, it adapts, then you'll understand the choice I had to make next. Like, subscribe, and share this story because every rebirth begins with a reckoning. That night, and I sat by the fire behind the church. He stared into the flames, lost in thought. They're rebuilding it, he said finally. I nodded. They always do. Humans crave control. It makes them feel safe. So what do we do now? He asked. Try to stop them again. I thought for a long moment before answering. No, we guide them. He looked at me confused. Guide them. Yes, I said softly. If they're going to build a new system, it needs to be one that remembers compassion, not fear, transparency, not silence. Your generation can't just destroy, it has to rebuild differently. He stared at me, something hardening behind his eyes. And what about you? I smiled sadly. I'm not part of this world anymore. I was the key to its past. You'll be the key to its future. For the first time, I saw a flicker of hope in him. He wasn't the frightened son anymore. He was becoming something stronger, a voice for the generation inheriting the wreckage. Over the next few days, he gathered people. A doctor, a teacher, 2 engineers, and a journalist who'd lost his entire archive in the purge. Together, they started building a network of truth sharers, not a system of control, but a system of witness. They called it the Mirror. Its mission was simple: no secrets, no power without proof, no voices erased. And though the world was still fragile, something about it felt pure. One evening, came to me with a folded piece of paper. What's this? I asked. He smiled faintly, a message from someone named Riley. I opened it slowly. Nora, the world needed someone to end it, but it also needs someone to teach it how to begin again. I can't do that, but you can. Don't disappear yet. P.S. There's still one file left unpurged. You might want to see it. Attached to the note was a small drive, black, unmarked. My heart skipped. What if it's a trap? I asked. I met his eyes. Then it's a trap I'm ready to walk into. We connected the drive to an old laptop in the rectory. The screen flickered, then displayed a single file, the testament. It opened to a video feed, static at first, then an image. Bob. He looked older, sicker, and tired, but his eyes still carried that same quiet fire. Nora, he said, his voice rough, if this reaches you, then you did it, you broke the chain. I pressed my hand to my mouth as tears blurred my vision. I always knew you'd choose truth. That's why I built the to only respond to your DNA. No one else could finish it, not me, not Rayleigh, not Caleb, only you. He paused, his eyes softening. But this isn't just about destruction, it's about legacy. You've set the world free, but freedom without guidance becomes chaos. That's why I left something behind, a blueprint hidden in the code, a way to rebuild, but right this time, transparent, accountable, human. Leaned closer, he planned this. Bob smiled faintly as though hearing him. You and are the future, Nora. The balance was born out of fear, the mirror must be born out of love. Promise me you'll lead them until they can stand without you. The video glitched, then ended with one final message across the screen. Truth survives through those who carry it gently. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The weight of everything, the loss, the guilt, the endless running, lifted just enough for me to breathe again. I turned to, he was never trying to save himself. He was trying to save this, a chance to start over. Nodded, tears in his eyes, then that's what we'll do. Over the next few weeks, we moved through towns, gathering people not to rebuild the old world but to create something better. It wasn't easy, there were fights, fear, hunger, but there was also light. People shared food, built fires, wrote news by hand again. And Wen stood on the steps of the ruined courthouse to give his first speech as the founder of the Mirror. I stood beside him, silent, proud. He spoke simply, "We can't erase what came before, but we can make sure lies never live longer than truth again." The crowd, farmers, teachers, refugees, cheered not out of victory but out of hope. For the first time in my life, hope didn't scare me. That night I sat alone under the stars, the same stars my mother and Bob once looked up to. The wind was calm, the air clean. I whispered to them both, "It's done, you can rest now." And though the world was far from healed, for the first time I felt it turning towards something real, not perfect, but alive. When the first broadcast from the Mirror went live, the world was quiet, too quiet. Old radios crackled back to life, their frequencies buzzing with static before settling on a single clear voice. It was a voice. "We begin again," he said. "No lies, no hidden rooms, no balance." I stood at the edge of the square, listening as people gathered, some frightened, some hopeful, some too tired to care. But as his words reached them, something flickered in their eyes. A spark, the same one I had once seen in Bob, in my mother, even in Caleb. Hope had returned, but it came with a shadow. Because I could feel it deep inside, in the quiet corners of my mind, something that hadn't been there before. Something left behind by the purge. If you've ever destroyed a monster only to find its reflection inside yourself, stay with me. Like, subscribe, and share this story, because this next part isn't about endings. It's about the ghosts that survive them. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flickers of light, codes, faces, voices whispering in binary patterns. At first, I thought it was trauma. But then I realized I was remembering things that no longer existed. Conversations between agents who were dead, locations of servers that had been wiped from the earth, entire files and data strings streaming through my mind like dreams that didn't belong to me. I wasn't just the key to the balance. Part of it had survived in me. When I told the next morning, he froze. "Mom, you're saying it's still inside you?" "Yes," I said softly. "The purge erased the network, but I'm the living copy. The encryption wasn't just linked to my DNA, it merged with it. I carry the fragments of the system now." He looked terrified. "Then people will come for you again, you can't stay." "I know." He clenched his fists. "No, Mom, you're not sacrificing yourself again." "This isn't sacrifice," I said. "It's maintenance. If I stay here, they'll rebuild the balance to find me. If I disappear, maybe they'll finally stop chasing ghosts." Later that day, we went to the river, the same one where Bob's fake funeral had taken place. The water was calm now, sunlight rippling across its surface. Stood beside me, silent. He didn't try to stop me this time. He knew this was the only way the world could heal. I handed him the cassette tape, my mother's final words, the story of our beginning. "Keep this," I said. "When people forget why truth matters, play it again." He took it with shaking hands. "Where will you go?" I smiled faintly, where stories go when they're finished, into whispers. That evening, I walked alone along the riverbank until the sun dipped below the hills. I could feel the static inside me fading, the hum of data, the ghost of the balance dissolving with every step. And just before the last light vanished, I whispered into the wind. "Bob, I kept your promise, I told the truth, the world remembers now." Then I let the current take me. His voice returned on the radio weeks later. "This is the Mirror. We tell the stories of those who built the world from ashes. And today, we tell one about a woman named Nora, who carried truth in her blood and gave it back to the world." The signal spread, crossing oceans, traveling through the new frequencies. the ones not built by corporations or governments but by people. And somewhere in that static, I like to think my voice still lingers. A pulse, a whisper, a promise. Truth survives. 5 years passed. The world didn't return to what it once was, but it found a rhythm again, slower, simpler, more human. People farmed, traded, and wrote on paper again. The hum of machines had been replaced by the sound of wind and voices. And yet, even in this quiet new world, echoes of the old one lingered. Not in the systems we used, but in the hearts of the people who missed their illusion of control. Often said, the hardest addiction to break isn't technology, it's power. He was right. If you've ever tried to build something pure from the ruins of what broke you, you know healing isn't clean, it's messy, human, and slow. Like, subscribe, and share this story because this is where peace begins, not in silence but in rebuilding the sound of trust. Had grown older, his once boyish face now lined with purpose. He led the mirror not as a ruler but as a listener. Every week he hosted open circles where people could share their truths, losses, dreams, regrets. They didn't use microphones or stages, just voices. And for the first time in generations, truth didn't need amplification. It was enough to be heard. One afternoon, a young girl approached him. She couldn't have been more than 10, her hair tied with a blue ribbon. "Are you the man whose mother saved the world?" she asked shyly. Smiled, "She didn't save the world, she gave it back to us." The girl frowned, thinking, then why do people still fight? He knelt down to meet her eyes, because healing takes longer than hurting, but we're trying. She nodded, satisfied, and ran off toward the fields. That small moment reminded him why the mirror existed, not for perfection but for possibility. That night, he found himself walking along the same river where his mother had vanished. The water glowed faintly in the moonlight, reflecting constellations she once loved. He whispered, "Mom, I hope you're seeing this." And in the hush that followed, he could almost hear her answer. "I am, and I'm proud." Months later, an archive arrived at the Mirror's headquarters, a weathered box sealed with wax. Inside were dozens of handwritten letters, all signed the same way. R. Riley unfolded the first page carefully. "For I kept my promise to your mother. I built sanctuaries for truth, hidden libraries across the world. They hold the stories people tried to erase. When the world is ready, you'll find them. Follow the river south. R." He looked up, stunned. Riley had lived. And not only that, she had continued his mother's mission. A week later, he gathered his closest circle. "We're going south," he told them. "There's more to the mirror than we thought." They traveled for days, across broken highways and blooming meadows that had reclaimed the ruins of cities. Each night, by the fire, they'd read one of Nora's old quotes had memorized. "The truth isn't a weapon," she once said. "It's a seed, you plant it even when you'll never see it grow." On the 12th day, they found it, an old train station buried in vines, its walls painted with murals of open eyes and outstretched hands. Inside were shelves of books, journals, old photos, and fragments of history thought lost forever. At the center, under a beam of sunlight breaking through the roof, sat a stone plaque. It read, "The mirror remembers what the balance tried to erase." Felt tears rise to his eyes. He touched the plaque and whispered, "Thank you, Riley." He spent the night there, reading the first of the recovered journals, accounts of people who had lived under the balance, stories his mother had fought to protect. And for the first time since her death, he didn't feel her as a ghost. He felt her as a presence, alive in every word, every breath of ink. When dawn came, he stood outside and looked at the horizon. Birds wheeled in the distance, their cries carried by the wind. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was continuing her story. He was living it. And in that realization came peace, not because the world was healed, but because it was healing. The world always tests what it tries to heal. And peace, I learned through my mother's stories, doesn't collapse from chaos, it collapses from comfort. Years after Nora's disappearance, the mirror had grown beyond what anyone imagined. It wasn't just a movement anymore, it was becoming an institution. People from distant communities sent in their stories, their confessions, their truths. And with each new record, the mirror became what my mother feared most, something people started to trust blindly. That's when the cracks began to show. If you've ever tried to protect something good, only to realize it's becoming exactly what you destroyed, then you'll understand's next battle. Like, subscribe, and share, because redemption isn't about undoing mistakes, it's about facing what you've become. It started small. A council formed, people who claimed to be the guardians of truth. At first, they were harmless librarians, archivists, translators. But slowly, they began deciding which stories were worth keeping. Then came the whispers. The mirror should guide society. We can't let misinformation spread. Some truths are too dangerous for people to hear. His stomach sank the first time he heard those words. He'd heard them before in his mother's old recordings, spoken by the same kind of people who once built the balance. History, it seemed, was trying to repeat itself. He called an assembly, inviting every member to the courtyard under the broken skylight. Rain dripped through the cracks, falling on paper stacks and candle jars. He stood before them and said quietly, "The moment we decide which truth matters, we stop being the mirror, we become the balance." Murmurs filled the crowd. An older woman raised her hand. "But people are confused, some stories contradict others. Don't we need to protect them from lies?" Shook his head. "We protect truth by trusting people to see all of it, not by filtering it." A man from the back shouted, "You sound like your mother, and look what her idealism cost her." The words hit like a blade, but he didn't flinch. He looked straight at the man. "It cost her everything, and that's exactly why I'll never let this turn into another system of control." The silence that followed was heavy. Some agreed, others didn't. The rebellion wasn't loud. It began in whispers, and whispers were always the most dangerous. Weeks later, the council took matters into their own hands. They restricted access to the oldest archives, claiming it was for preservation. They began labeling stories as or unverified. And then one night, a massive data vault burned to the ground, a fire no one claimed responsibility for. Stared at the ruins, smoke rising against the dawn. He knew what this meant. Corruption had found its way in. He thought of his mother's last words, "Truth survives through those who carry it gently." He whispered, "Then I'll carry it alone if I must." That night he opened the vault's remaining terminal, one of the few connected remnants of the pre-purge world. He entered the old access code Nora once used. The screen flickered, then came to life. "Welcome, Nora Brooks. Last access, 5 years, 11 months ago." Exhaled sharply, the machine recognized her credentials because he carried her blood. He found a hidden directory marked Redemption. Inside were voice logs, not from Nora but from Bob. "If you're hearing this, you've reached the moment we feared most. The system that was meant to protect truth will start rewriting it. Don't destroy it again, guide it, redeem it." He froze, tears building. Bob had known this would happen. The next morning, gathered the council. He didn't accuse, he didn't threaten. He simply placed the terminal in front of them and pressed play. Bob's voice filled the hall. "Control is seductive, even when wrapped in noble words. The balance didn't start as tyranny, it started as guidance." The members listened, uneasily shifting in their seats. Turned to them, voice steady. "We either become the very system we burned down, or we rebuild the mirror as it was meant to be, open, fragile, free." He paused, looking at the rain hitting the windows. "Freedom is messy, but it's honest." Silence hung like a verdict. Then one by one, the council members stood, not all of them, but enough. They agreed to dissolve their authority and restore open access to every story, every voice. It wasn't victory, it was redemption, quiet, heavy, and incomplete. But that's what redemption always is. That night, returned to the riverbank. He carried one of the old mirror medallions in his hand and whispered, "Mom, I finally understand. You didn't just destroy the balance. You taught me how to forgive it and myself." The medallion caught the moonlight, glinting like an echo of the past. He dropped it into the river, watching it vanish beneath the surface. He had saved the mirror not by fighting its corruption, but by humbling it. And as he walked home, he realized redemption isn't about rebuilding what was lost. It's about choosing not to lose yourself again in the process. It began with a sound. A soft, static pulse that echoed through the old communication towers, faint but steady like a heartbeat. At first, everyone thought it was just interference, the aftertaste of a forgotten frequency. But then the signal stabilized and the voice came through. "If you're hearing this, it means the mirror is alive." It was her. My mother's voice, calm, warm, unhurried. It wasn't a recording I'd ever heard before. I froze, my breath caught in my chest as the transmission continued. "If the world is still listening, it means you did it. You learned what I couldn't finish. Don't look for me. I'm in every word you've spoken, in every truth that survived." The people around me looked at one another in stunned silence. The old transmitters of the mirror had never carried sound like this before. And yet, every single one from the city to the rural settlements played the same broadcast at the same time. It wasn't coincidence. It was connection. If you've ever lost someone only to feel them return in a way that words can't explain, you know this kind of moment. Like, share, and comment if you've ever felt someone watching over your story, long after they were gone. The entire community gathered around the square, faces tilted toward the speakers that hung from the old pylons. Her voice filled every corner of the courtyard, soft yet commanding, alive in a way that made even the children still. Truth is not inheritance, it's stewardship, Nora said. If you hold it lightly, and if you lose it, search not with anger but with wonder. For a moment, it felt like time folded back on itself. The years between her disappearance and now collapsed into this single thread of sound. I felt tears rise, but I didn't hide them. This wasn't grief anymore. It was grace. After the transmission ended, the Mirror's council rushed to decode it. Was it a looped file, a triggered Nora had hidden years ago? Some said it was an encrypted recording. Others whispered that it was impossible, that she was gone and yet somehow not. I didn't need proof. I knew my mother too well. If she'd built this world of signals and frequencies, she'd also built herself into it. Her consciousness, her memories, her voice, all stored across fragments of data, waiting to reconnect when the world was ready. That night I sat in the Mirror's archive room, surrounded by old paper and flickering terminals. The signal still hummed faintly through the walls. I whispered, "Mom, what do I do now?" A soft breeze moved through the cracked window, carrying the scent of rain, and somehow I knew her answer. Keep listening. Weeks passed and the signal returned, not just once but in waves. Each broadcast carried a different message, fragments of Nora's reflections, her philosophies, her laughter. People began to gather every evening to listen. It became a ritual, not worship but remembrance. They didn't see her as a ghost or a goddess. They saw her as what she always was, a voice of reason in a world of noise. And through it, something extraordinary happened. Communities that had stopped communicating began reconnecting again. Villages traded stories. Artists began painting murals of the Whisperer, a faceless woman with her hand raised to the wind. Children recited her words as lullabies. Truth is the bridge between who we were and who we can still become. One night I received a private transmission. The same signal frequency, but only audible in my terminal. When I played it, there was a moment of silence and then a whisper. "My son, I knew the world would find you before I did. I'm proud of who you became. You didn't just rebuild the mirror, you became it." The voice trembled slightly, as if she was speaking from far away, beyond time, beyond code. "And when you hear me next, you'll know it's time to let me go." I pressed my hands against my face, sobbing quietly. All the years of loss, of rebuilding, of carrying her memory, condensed into a single moment of release. The next morning, I broadcast one message across every remaining tower. "This is the mirror. For years, we've spoken in my mother's voice, but now we must learn to speak in our own." And then I did something that terrified me. I turned off the signal. The silence that followed was deafening and beautiful. Because it wasn't emptiness anymore. It was space for the next voices to rise. I stood by the window, feeling the first light of morning. For the first time in decades, the world wasn't listening to one voice. It was listening to each other. And that, I realized, was the real miracle of reconnection. Not reviving the past, but allowing it to teach us how to begin again. Years later, when people spoke of the mirror, they didn't talk about rebellion or technology. They talked about what it taught. About a woman who vanished but left behind a voice. And a son who turned that voice into a world of its own. The world had changed again, not with explosions or algorithms, but with understanding. Villages that once hid in silence now sent one another handwritten letters. Children grew up not fearing questions. And in the quiet spaces between truth and forgiveness, humanity found itself again. If this story has reached your heart, pause here. Like, comment, and share, not just for the story, but for every truth you've ever been brave enough to tell. Often sat by the window of the Mirror's library, watching the new generation of scribes and storytellers pass through the courtyard. No one came to seek control anymore. They came to share, to listen, to remember. He sometimes smiled at how simple it all was. The dream his mother had died for had become ordinary life. And maybe that was the point all along. One afternoon, a group of children asked him, what was the balance really? He hesitated, then answered softly. It was a time when people thought they could control truth. They thought if they silenced pain, they could erase it. And did it work? One of them asked. Chuckled gently. No, my dear, pain doesn't disappear when ignored, it just waits to be understood. He spent his final years writing, not manifestos or speeches, but stories. Simple ones about love, loss, kindness, and the quiet courage of telling the truth. Each story ended the same way. The truth isn't heavy when shared, it only weighs us down when hidden. When passed away, his writings were sealed in a wooden box and placed beside his mother's old envelope, the one that had once held her confession, her final truth. The inscription on his box read, "He didn't rebuild the world, he reminded it how to feel." And years after even his name had faded into legend, people still gathered on the anniversary of the mirror's rebirth. They lit candles, shared confessions, and whispered into the wind, because they believed somehow that the wind still carried Nora's voice. A voice that once said, "Truth is not what divides us, it's what brings us home." In the final archive entry of the mirror, a single line was found, written in his hand. If you ever find this story, don't believe it's about me. It's about you, the listener, the seeker, the one who dares to ask why. And maybe that's what the mirror was meant to be all along. Not a system, not a legacy, but a question whispered across time. What truth are you brave enough to face? The world was quiet again, but this time it wasn't silence born of fear. It was peace born of understanding. Because the mirror no longer belonged to one person. It belonged to everyone. Did this story touch your heart? Tell me in the comments and let me know where you're listening from. Subscribe to SoulWhisper for more stories that heal, remind, and reconnect. There's a quietness that comes after the truth is finally told, not an empty quiet, but one that feels alive. The world had grown into that silence. No longer ruled by fear or systems, it now breathed with its own rhythm. People didn't need to shout to be heard anymore. They had learned to listen. The mirror stood as both symbol and sanctuary. Where machines once hummed with control, birds now nested. The old metal towers were wrapped in ivy and morning dew. Every corner of the old world had been softened by time, reclaimed by the living. If you've made it this far, it means you believe in stories that heal. So before we end, like, subscribe, and share this story. Because this isn't just the end of Nora's legacy. It's the beginning of yours. In that gentle dawn, a young girl, the same one with the blue ribbon who once asked about the man whose mother saved the world, stood where ashes had been scattered. She held a notebook in her hands, her own mirrored journal. She whispered softly, "Truth doesn't die, it just waits to be retold." Her words drifted through the open air, carried by wind over rivers, over mountains, over the places where Nora had once walked. And somewhere beyond sight or sound, it felt as though the wind answered back, a soft hum, a mother's echo. "I'm still listening." That day, as the sun rose, the glass dome of the mirror caught the light. It refracted into 1,000 colors, scattering beams across the valley. People paused in their work to look up, shielding their eyes as the sky shimmered. For a brief, perfect moment, it looked like the world itself was remembering. Remembering what it had once lost. Remembering what it had found again. The girl opened her notebook and began to write. Not about war or betrayal, not about systems or power, but about kindness. The quiet, unrecorded kind that keeps the world from falling apart. And at the bottom of the first page, she wrote, "Inspired by Nora Brooks, who reminded us that the truth, no matter how buried, always finds the light." The story of the mirror didn't end in flame or revolution. It ended here in peace and patience and the small, human promise to keep telling the truth. Not to glorify it, not to control it. Just to remember it. Because in the end, truth isn't about the past. It's about the courage to look forward without fear. The wind rustled through the trees once more, a sound that might have been coincidence. Or maybe, just maybe, it was Nora's final whisper, carried into eternity. Light is what happens when love learns how to tell the truth. Did this story touch your heart? Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And if you believe in stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Subscribe to Soul Whisper, where every story is a mirror reflecting the soul.